It's 7:30. I'm looking to see which trustees are, if we're here. I see Doug on my screen, and that's all. Oh, I see Jeremy Gallen now too. We're just waiting now for the attendance of the board trustees to begin the meeting. I see Allison now. Okay, so welcome everyone. I want to call to order the Board of Education meeting Monday, August 10th, 2020. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I want to hand it over to Dr. Henning Piedmont for any announcements, and then we can move on to some administrative comments. Can't hear you.
Take my mute off. Good evening, board trustees. I just wanted to bring a couple of things to your attention. One is congratulations to Hastings High School. I received a notification that from our, at the time, our interim commissioner of education in the Board of Regents, writing to congratulate the district for having a school that has been designated as a recognition school. This school is among those in New York State that have high achievement, high academic achievement, growth and graduation rate, and have made progress during the 2018-2019 school year. There's a certificate enclosed and in recognition of Hastings High School. This is in honor of all the amazing work that every educator, the administrators, Mr. Pietro, Ms. Hardesty, all of our, everyone, all the clerical members, teacher aides, teacher assistants, everyone in the high school is responsible for this recognition. So I want to thank them all for this amazing, accolade, and I will make sure that Mr. Pietro has this tomorrow. But that's a pretty terrific, way to start a board meeting. I'd also like
Valerie, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to congratulate the students. It's nice to get the kudos, but we are there for the kids, and it's the kids who are working so hard and make that our school such a wonderful place. So for me, it's the kids' awards. It's not really our award, but yeah, we do a great job. But Sophia, I think you're on this call, so if you can extend my congratulations to the entire student body at Hastings High School, I would really appreciate it. Sorry, Valerie.
No, Lou, I expected you to say that, so thank you. I'd also like to point out a couple of documents that I received today that I added to, one I received probably about within the hour from the Westchester County Health Department. The superintendent had asked the Westchester County Health Department for some guidance on the steps we should take in the event a student or staff member tests positive for COVID-19. So they provided that document. I made it available on Board Docs, and it will also be on our website. And it basically outlines a system of consistent practices across all school districts. So what happens in one school district, is the same in terms of, the procedures for, who to report COVID-19 to when a person tests positive, when they can return to school, if students are on vacation from states on the governor's travel advisory, who are not allowed to come into New York State, do they need to quarantine? They define what close contact means. There are questions about, again, more quarantine and isolation clarifications, contact tracing, and a few examples of scenarios, as well as the sharing of medical information, parental permission, and so forth. So it's a really important document the superintendents were waiting for, so that when the time comes, we have some really good consistent guidelines that we can use. So this is on board docs, and it'll also be on our website. I'd also like to let you know that I did upload another document. I want to thank our administrators for providing responses to 4 questions that are going to be part of our discussion under item 3B relative to school reopening. So there are a number of questions that a number of our community members are asking with regards to space and how they communicate and have been communicating with their faculty and staff since school dismissed with regards to school opening. So those documents are there as well. We will also have our 4 surveys on our website. If they're not already, I did send them to our webmaster. I thought we could upload the entire Google form, but we had some technical difficulties with that, so we had to revert to a old-fashioned cut and paste onto a Google Doc. So those 4 surveys will be available if they're not already there. They contain all of the both open-ended responses as well as the closed-ended ones with regards to the preferred hybrid model across the different groups, our faculty and staff survey, our parent surveys at Hillside, Farragut, and the high school. I think that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I know, Ms. Mansky, you had some comments.
I do. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So we've been very busy throughout the district right now. Valerie and I, since our last Board of Education meeting, met with a focus group of teachers. And over a period of a few days, we were creating signature practices for working with Google Classroom and also Google Calendar. So we reviewed the feedback that was received from families around what wasn't working and what was. And then by building, we started to generate a list of signature practices to think about how we could be more supportive of students and respond to the feedback we received about the need for organizational practices to be enhanced. So we developed a whole group of practices. We have K-12, we have K-8, and we have 5-8, so they were differentiated by level. And we're going to build in professional learning around those things prior to the start of school. Since our July Board of Education meeting, we met with 6 different focus groups. We had a parent focus group, a student focus group for each of the 3 buildings. And we then were able to take all of the information that we received and look for some patterns, which were pretty clear. So again, I spoke around organization. There was also interest in having a predictable schedule. And there was a desire expressed to experience more of that live instruction to be able to actually see the teacher. These patterns were not new. They confirmed what we had heard at the Hastings Home Help Hours through individual conversations we had had with families and through survey data, but it was really very helpful just to reinforce and to make sure we had a very good sense and be able to unpack with the focus groups what they were thinking about. We had our summer learning program, which spanned a few weeks. I would like to thank all of our teachers who participated in that program. The program has now formally concluded, and I was able to generate a brief survey to the teachers who participated for feedback, specifically around some of the instructional resources that we were working with in the program. And so that was really helpful to think about some of the newer learning resources that we had procured just specifically for the summer, and served to inform some of the web-based resources that we will be moving towards in the fall, thinking about how to support teachers with an instructional resource toolkit. We've scheduled a series of faculty forums, one of which took place earlier today. And during these forums, we reviewed the processes and outcomes of the Instruction and Technology Reopening Subcommittee, the processes and outcomes of the K-12 Educator Focus Group that I was just describing that worked around the signature practices, and we talked together around next steps. The majority of our time, however, was and will continue to be dedicated to question and answer sessions with the faculty and staff. They have many questions which are very thoughtful, very valid, and some of which we're unpacking and working through together, and others that we've had that we can answer immediately based on clear guidance that we've received from the state. So that will be ongoing. Technology resources. So since the conclusion of the school year, we've been working on getting quotes for a variety of new instructional resources, some of which you'll see on tonight's Board of Education agenda for consideration, which we hope will be approved. And these resources include Screencastify Extended, which was a heavily requested web-based resource from the teachers. Nearpod, also very heavily requested. Edpuzzle and Kami, and I put links in board docs so that people can explore each of those things. Social emotional learning framework. So I'd like to thank Jeanette Coker, Director of Counseling, the building leadership team, the school counselors, the psychologists. They've been working very diligently behind the scenes in the development of a social emotional learning framework. And as we've discussed, this is going to be really critical as students are transitioning back to school. And it will also, I mean, there is a compliance piece around the state requirement, but the group is really working thoughtfully to think about professional learning, education, instruction, assessment, and intervention, specifically related to social emotional learning. And it has been evolving and will continue to evolve to incorporate links around how each of these areas will be operationalized, including an advisory that will be happening at both the middle school and the high school level. On the funding front, I've been working to complete our consolidated plan, which will enable the release of title funding for the district for the 2021 school year. And also there is a new application to secure federal coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security, CARES Act funding. And that is actually inclusive of 2 sub-applications. And that is actually tied to our state aid that we used to be receiving that we now need to apply for. So that is in motion as well and due later this week. But there's a live streaming and instruction committee that has been meeting. And this group has been working together to design how students and teachers will be experiencing instruction over the course of the school day. And the design criteria is what we've all had a unanimous agreement around. And so that design criteria is as follows. So we want instruction to be psychologically sound for students in a hybrid or a remote learning model. In any model, of course, but our group was specifically focusing on those 2. Actionable for teachers, blended, incorporates project-based experiences, incorporates collaborative, engaging experiences, follows a schedule and routines, and is student-centered. So we know at tonight's meeting, we'll be exploring some of those conversations more, and I just wanted to make sure that I outlined our criteria out front. And those are my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Maureen?
Yes. There'll be other things we'll be talking about throughout the presentations tonight, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the ventilation analysis that we had our district engineers provide to the board, and we'll be talking about it later in terms of our COVID expenses. So last week, the engineers came out to the building and they did a full evaluation on every room, every system in every room, and the air intake and outtake of every space in the district. They provided an initial report that needed to be, Joe felt there was some errors in it, and he went through and walked back the buildings this week with the engineers to review their analysis. And they did make some updates based on that walkthrough. So the analysis that they provided identified areas that needed additional ventilation to comply with current building code. being this is an old building, we suspected there may be some areas that they would detect on the walkthrough. They have provided for us recommendations to correct the areas noted. At Hillside School, all the classrooms have the correct ventilation and did not require any additional work. And we felt confident about Hillside because in the last bond, we actually had upgraded our univentilators in all the classrooms. And that's what actually provides heat and fresh air as well as air conditioning. So they were all in great shape. But at Hillside School, there were 6 office spaces that were identified as needing additional ventilation. The areas were mostly interior rooms that did not have a univentilator in there. And part of it was because they were areas that were sometimes constructed when a need arose. And they also did not have a space for a window in those rooms. In those areas, in order to bring them up to compliance, we will be installing an energy recovery ventilator, an ERV. And these units provide fresh air into the room, and they also help exhaust out air from the room. So that's 6 spaces. Those ERVs have been ordered and we expect them in the district next week, and they will be installed probably before August 24th at the latest. And down here at the Farragut complex, there were 22 classrooms that needed to be addressed. And they were simple fixes. What it was there were some areas in which there was a drop ceiling. And in those drop ceilings, one of the ceiling tiles needed to be removed and replaced with what is called, it's like an egg carton type grill, egg crate grill. And that would allow, because there is existing ventilation systems above those, and that would just help with the air quality and the airflow. So those have already been done, and the engineers, agreed that that was the correction, and they already are installed. Let me see, what else do we have? And there was an additional 6 classrooms where an exhaust system did not exist. And in those, currently this week, they're working on putting in vent units in those rooms, and that will help with the air coming in and out. And there were also a need to install 10 ERVs in this building as well. And again, similar to Hillside, there were really areas that were identified were interior office spaces and conference rooms that did not, have windows in them. There was, in terms of instructional spaces that also needed ERVs here at the Farragut, it was the music computer lab, which is right next door to the music room, but again, does not have windows, and that space needed an ERV, and the TV studio. And all of those, all that equipment, again, will be installed no later than August 24th. And we have been working with the engineers to ensure that we have the correct sizing. They helped us size the units and help design where they would need to be located in those rooms. Joe's team will be able to get all that done. And as we've been talking about, this work was our top priority, and I'm really happy that the architects and engineers are able to come in and provide that analysis. And I know a lot of other schools are now kind of scrambling to try to get that. So we're very thankful that our engineers were able to come out and assist us in that work. Just an update with the storm last week, we did have several trees that fell on the Burke estate. Thankfully, we didn't have too much damage here at the building. We did lose power at Hillside up until Saturday. And Joe's crew was able to clean up most of the trees that came down. And we were thankful because there were about 4 or 5 trees that were not in great shape that we had taken down last spring, and we're happy we did that, or else we may have had a larger issue. And that concludes my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Lauren, may I mention the forums that are this week? I'm so sorry.
Of course. Go ahead, Valerie.
Sure. So as Melissa mentioned, today was our 2nd faculty and staff forum on school reopening. Tomorrow we have a community forum on school opening. That's our 2nd one. That starts at 4:30. We have increased capacities in our use of Zoom webinar this time around. We expected to be able to have a capacity of 1,000, but that requires another sort of a layer of sign off that we don't have yet. So, but we will have that capacity, but certainly tomorrow's webinar does have a capacity of 500 participants. On Wednesday, once again, I want to thank PTSA and SEPTA for hosting a superintendent's chat on school reopening. That's their 2nd one. And then next week, we have our 3rd faculty and staff forum next week, Tuesday, the 18th from 3:30 to 5. There's a special education reopening forum hosted by Laura Sullivan and Tessa Stewart, and that's on Thursday, August 20th from 4:30 to 5:30. On that same week, the next day, Hillside Elementary School will have its reopening forum for parents, and that's Friday the 21st from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. The Hastings High School reopening forum will be also on Friday, right after the the elementary school forum, and that's from noon to 1:30. And the Farragut Middle School reopening forum for parents will also be on Friday, August 21st from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. So there's lots of opportunities for questions, to ask questions about our school reopening plan. As you can see, there is an agenda item tonight that will also have some conversation around school reopening. We also have our frequently asked questions document on our website, and we ask that you take a look at that document. It is updated as we receive new information. We'll continue to add a number of things to our website. As you know, the governor asked that we pull out some information from our school reopening plan, notably our specifications around contact tracing, COVID-19 testing, which I alluded to earlier. Our Westchester County Health Department has helped us with that, so that information will be listed there. And by the end of the week, as Melissa Szymanski mentioned, our remote learning plan will also be part of a standalone outside of our school reopening plan, so that those three things can be easily found on our website. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Valerie. We can move on to public comment. In advance of the meeting, there are three members of the public that provided information that they would like to speak. If during this meeting, if there are additional members of the community that would like to provide public comment, please email our district clerk during the meeting, Janine Janauer. It's JENAUERJ@hohschools.org. Is Ms. Kate Janofsky on the call? And if you
yes, I am. I'm here.
Thank you. And if you could please limit your comments to 3 minutes and mention if you're a resident of Hastings or not.
Sure, I'm a resident of Hastings, and I see on the agenda my husband is another third of your commenters, so I will endeavor to keep myself extremely brief. I thank you for the opportunity to comment this evening. My family and I feel extraordinarily fortunate to live in Hastings, and there's no question that this is a unique community that is unwaveringly committed to the success of our children. So we feel extremely fortunate to be here in Hastings and to be in this school district with this extraordinary tradition. What I would like to speak to very briefly is simply in support of seeking answers to some of the questions that were posed by the board for tonight, that were circulated, as I myself as a citizen and resident of Hastings have many of these same questions. Based on the plan itself and the power presentation to the community, I was under the impression that all three models were on the table, and in terms of reopening, and that it depended on what Governor Cuomo would do. We, Hastings, were prepared for anything, and we were going to do a darn good job of it, whatever it was going to be. And this community, this state's extraordinary hard work paid off. We are at a less than 1% infection rate per the state. Attending school is scientifically low risk. We are, in fact, New York tough, and that's an extraordinary accomplishment that this community has worked so hard for. My reaction to Friday's email following Cuomo's announcements that school may reopen was respectfully confusion. The sole rationale for not reopening that was articulated in the email was the inability to find 6 feet of social distance space for on-campus learning. But that's not the standard that's set forth in the presentation, and it's not the standard that was dictated by the state and articulated in the PowerPoint. So I'm confused because the plan that was submitted, the plan doesn't match the plan of what we're contemplating doing now, 7 or 10 days later. even if you don't support reopening full time, if you don't support reopening at all, as you sit here today, we don't totally know why Hastings isn't reopening full time, regardless of what your position is on what we should do. We don't know why we're doing or what we're not doing on the current directive. But here's the most important issue for me looking forward, is that the email was missing a critical second sentence, this vital piece of information. Perhaps it's not feasible to reopen because of this 6 feet. The second sentence, we can't reopen. Here's what it would take to find that 6 feet. And in order to find 6 feet, we must do X. I don't know what X is. X may be more teachers. X may be on-campus square footage. X may be this many more spaces must be brought up to building code. This many more $1 million is needed in order to reopen full-time on campus or to open buildings for more days a week. I don't actually know, as I sit here today, what is needed to reopen or to find that 6 feet. And truthfully, X could be completely unreasonable. X could be hundreds of more $1 million than could ever be reasonably sought privately or could be sought by the state after Congress passes its anticipated $100 billion plus in the coming days. I don't know, but it's the not knowing that makes it impossible to feel comfortable and supportive of this decision. The only other point I wanted to make this evening is that I would, particularly in light of the New York Times article that came out a few weeks ago on Hastings and pods, to encourage the board, if it is at all possible in any way, to pursue the piece of information that these decisions, hybrid or distance, have real immediate economic consequences for Hastings families. People are making career decisions and personal savings decisions that I don't think are irrelevant to the conversation. So with that, thank you so much for your continued work and support, and we look forward to all information that's available in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Janofsky. The second public comment was submitted by Amy Nichols. Are you on the call?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I want to thank everybody who has put so much time and energy and thought into our planning for fall. It's a really that's foremost the well-being and safety of our teachers and making sure that their needs are met, because if their needs are not met, they will not be able to meet our children. So at least we're able to see the survey results from the teachers that were given to the teachers about the hybrid. Sound wasn't great, so I apologize if this was addressed, but I was actually really struck by the fact that we only got the one question from them. I would have loved to see the other answers that they provided, but I was struck by the fact that about 25% chose some other response on the question about hybrid models, and I'm very curious about that piece of it and would really welcome more feedback and thoughts from the teachers who will actually be implementing this and have the best perspective on what's going to be most effective, what's going to be the safest, what's going to be best for the students. And I'm wondering if, given what we know now, if it would make sense to have an additional survey that could be very simple and just asking, it could be to both parents and to the teachers and staff, asking how many prefer a full remote option versus the hybrid option, and to see where those numbers lie, as well as the parents and guardians. And I'd also really, if this is possible, to get feedback that the parents can see on their comfort level with the safety protocol, as well as the efficacy of the models that are being proposed, any concerns that they might have, any tweaks that could be done. So just as a parent, I kind of know what I want to advocate for my child, because I don't know what the classroom will look like. So just any kind of information that the parent community can get from the faculty and staff who will be, on the ground would be so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. I know also we have one last comment that was prepared to be read by written by Alex Janowski.
After I read the comment, Andy Zimmerman would also like to make a comment, Lauren. He emailed us. So I'll read the comment first. Okay. From Alex Janowski. I'm requesting additional information concerning reopening plans for the upcoming school year following Friday's community update message. This afternoon, Governor Cuomo announced that schools may reopen as described in their school reopening plan submitted on July 31st, 2020. Please advise why scenario 3, schools open, of the school district's plan submitted on July 31st for all children learning on campus is not feasible as of August 7th, 2020, and by what process it was determined that it is not feasible. What changed in the last week? The model guidelines provided by the state and summarized on the slide deck presented at the community forum specify that to ensure the safety of students and staff, schools can use social distancing of 6 feet or add barriers or require everyone to wear a mask or face covering. If it is not feasible to reopen school on September 8th, 2020 with all children learning on campus, please advise what steps the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools are taking in order to make it feasible as soon as possible thereafter. I appreciate all of the time and consideration that has been invested in a successful reopening and am grateful for your commitment to our children. Thank you, Alex Janowski.
Thank you for reading it on his behalf, Janine. Andy Zimmerman, are you on the call? You'd sent in a note to Janine. We can come back to Andy Zimmerman in the second public comment. I did also notice.
I'm here. Can I
yes,
speak?
Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, sorry, I failed to unmute myself.
Just a reminder, we're keeping comments to 3 minutes.
Right. Well, I realize that the whole process of this has been very controversial, and a lot of people have contributed and have been arguing about what to do. My experience in the spring was, although it wasn't perfect, it worked for my family as far as distance learning. My kid was not happy all the time, but he did get his work done and he did learn a lot. And so I am not one of those who says the whole thing was terrible. I think you'd find a lot of people who thought that it was pretty good, although it could be better. And we were promised at that time that the whole distance learning thing would be improved over the summer. I believe, at least, that I remember Valerie saying that. From what I've heard, there hasn't really been training in the last almost 5 months, or not very much, for the teachers, let alone the students and the parents, for distance learning. And the plans that I've seen so far for the fall seem actually not as good as far as just streaming from the classrooms when kids are at home, either if they're at home all the time or if they're home half the time or whatever. I don't understand how a teacher can teach the kids in the classroom and kids at the home at the same time. It just sounds difficult. And I just don't understand why, to me, the best thing would be if some parents could keep their kids home, some teachers could stay home, others could send their kids to school, and other teachers could go to school. And in other words, you could be doing it partly at home and partly at school and have it be hybrid in that way. That would seem the way that would make people the happiest and would make the less stress on our school facilities, allow more distance for those who are at school. If more of the elementary school kids wanted to go to school, then you could take over part of the middle school and the middle school could take over part of the high school. I think that's probably what would end up happening. I'm sure there would be, challenges to it. You'd have to, like, a lot of expectations have to be adjusted. Teachers might have to teach things they wouldn't normally teach, but they're certified for, of course, or grades they didn't normally teach. and you know, there might have to be some compromises in terms of what courses people could take. But as far as I can tell, that option has not even been considered. At least I haven't seen it in any of the materials. So that's, I mean, I hope that we're still considering that. And I hope we're at any time, given the lack of testing in this country, and it goes all the way up to the whole country, that there's a problem with testing as far as getting results back in time. We may have to close down for 2 weeks at any time. And so I hope the whole distance learning from home thing, it can
Excuse me,
be,
Andy, you need to wrap up your comment now.
right. I just think I would like to see some evidence that some kind of better training and planning is done for that, which I haven't seen so far. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. But 2 items I just wanted to mention to all that are attending, that going forward, there will be an opportunity, a space dedicated on our website that will be initiated prior to the next board meeting, where if there are questions or any comments that needed addressing, that needed to be answered, there will be a public response by the board that will be posted on that part of our website. That hasn't been practiced in the past. It's practiced during our board meeting not to directly respond or answer, because it does provide us an opportunity to respond as a collective body. I did note a board member noticed that our student trustee is on this call. I noticed that we don't have a student report on our agenda, but I did just want to give the courtesy to Sophia, if you wanted to make a student a comment, that this would be a time if you wanted to do that, since you're on the call.
Hi.
Hello.
Well, there's not really much of a consensus among the students that I've heard about what everyone wants. I think we're just waiting to find out. So I'm optimistic that we can go in some form, and that's what I'm hoping for, but it is what it is, and I'll do what's told.
Thank you, Sophia. We have 2 presentations. Tonight, we're going to start first with a presentation about the COVID-19 expenses to date. And Maureen and her team have prepared a presentation that gives us an overview, of the expenses.
Janine, can you bring it up for me? The presentation. I just threw it on a couple slides and we'll walk through it just to frame the conversation. You know, the
It's there,
good news.
Maureen?
Excuse me?
It's on the screen.
I don't see it. No. I don't see it being projected.
Do other board members see it?
No, your screen appears frozen when I'm looking at it, Janine.
All right, one moment. What I can do.
So in our budget last year, just to start off, we did set aside some dollars for COVID expenses. We had actually started out with 250,000, but of course, through our deliberations with our budget, we did bring that amount down without really having a lot of understanding of what we may be facing. So this is kind of like Lauren said, to kind of give you a sense of where we're at now, and I'll give you a sense of how that compared to the budget. So we'll start, we broke it down when we budgeted for it in our current budget. We broke it down in 3 areas. We knew we would have some instructional expenses related to what we were calling the COVID slide at the time, and the need for additional softwares. So we had put some money aside in knowing we'd have some spending over the summer as well as the school year. And we also put money toward additional nursing services and building levels. So first we'll go through the instructional expenses. And the first slide here that you're seeing really speaks to the professional hours of our staff that was spent over the summer. giving both direct services to students as well as, and Melissa can, jump in and speak to some of the things that were going on. So the first two line items here were for the planning hours that were needed for the teachers to plan for delivering the instruction to the students that were identified as in need of having some services over the summer, and the first two lines are reflective of that. I think it was 3 weeks, Melissa, of direct instruction, and you can, if the board wanted to know how many students that covered. So those were where the first two lines of expenses were spent. And then in addition, there's been learning group focus groups happening over the summer. And you can see the amount of hours spent on each task and the amount of the rate of pay associated with it, which is contractual, as well as the distance learning signature practices and stipends for participants. So the last three are really focused on what is happening now for the reopening of school and some of the PD that's been going on, and the focus groups of teachers that are helping in that planning. And you can see the expenses related there. So basically, we spent about $81,000 on that, those type of PD and direct instructional hours. Next slide, please, Janine. And Melissa, I would defer to her if you have any questions on those. Then these were the software that we purchased for the summer learning program. They were using Ingenuity and Achieve 3000, and those are the costs associated with that. And you can go to the next screen, Janine. I didn't do a subtotal on this because I totaled it with the total cost of instructional software. This is just to give you a sense, and I think, things that we knew we were going to need some software, but as we got into this whole planning for the school year, we, started to have expenses that we never had really contemplated. We needed to have a license for Zoom meetings, and then we needed a license for Zoom webinar, and different types of instructional software. The Ingenuity school year license, $45,000, and the Odyssey-ware. And as Melissa said, these came out of working with teachers, softwares that they felt were really needed after they went through the spring, not really having access to a lot of different software titles. There's some support from the Lyric that accompanies helping us when we're implementing the software and the support related to that. Screencastify, iTutor, which Valerie can speak to I think when it's on the agenda later in the evening, so they can speak to those different contracts at that time. That's, again, if we have to provide tutoring services for students that are unable to come to school, we needed to have a resource to do that. Nearpod, Edpuzzle, Kami, the keyboarding software. So where we are today, and these are additional software licenses that we, were up and above what we would normally have purchased, because things such as Dreambox, they were already budgeted in our regular budget. They had nothing, these are things that were kind of after planning for the COVID return. That's $133,000 just in software. Instructional technology. So when we started setting up the classrooms, we needed webcams, we needed headsets so that teachers can, have the proper technology setups to be able to stream from their classrooms. Most of the computers in the district do not have cameras, I think, if not all. So there was a need to purchase webcams and headsets for every teacher's classroom. Although we purchased quite a bit of Chromebooks at the end of last school year, we now realize that as we're deploying them out and bringing them down further into the hillside and trying to deploy so we don't have to share technology and being prepared for that hybrid model, there's going to be a need to purchase another 200 additional Chromebooks, which we're in the process of trying to secure. We needed some additional hotspots, because this actually gives you flexibility, not only for students that need to potentially need them at home, because we already had hotspots that we had already deployed, but this will also allow teachers to go outside, right? So we don't have Wi-Fi outside, but if a teacher wanted to be outside with a class with Chromebooks, they could then bring those hotspots outside, and that would be helpful in their ability to continue to teach out there. So, we, in addition to the students who may need some additional hotspots, because we're getting more requests in for those, we also wanted to have some to allow teachers to have the ability to bring those outside with them when they're with classes. We also needed to purchase a health self-assessment tool, and that's the screening tool that Valerie will speak to later this evening. And there was also a need to increase our bandwidth to ensure that we would be able to not have the any problems on the technical side when teachers are trying to stream their lessons. So that increased our instructional technology budget on like the hardware side by $95,000. Next, Janine. Nursing expenses. So we had planned, I believe, in the budget, I think we had put like $25,000 extra, but when we started to unpack the document from the state, and it was very clear that, we spoke about this earlier in our reopening plan with staff, there's a need to have 2 separate nurses' office in each building. That was actually one that was extremely, it wasn't an option, it was something you had to do. In this complex where we have 2 nurses that share a space, we were able to put one in one space and one in the other. But with also the nurses being partnering with the Department of Health and being, I think, a piece in that, both the health, the tracing aspects of the work, as well as dealing with our doctor, and their workload is going to increase significantly. We felt that they needed some additional nursing hours at this building, at the Farragut complex. So we are going to give them another 4 hours a day for like an LPN to also assist in the office. And this way, both offices, they have a clerical support, and that clerical support person will stay with one nurse in one space, and the LPN will be there to assist the other nurse in the other space, because there's holding areas, and there's also a need to check in children and put the information in the computer, and they need to keep those spaces completely separate. At Hillside School, where we really only have one nurse and a person who comes in 2-3 hours a day, we needed to bring in another full-time RN, because the other office has to be staffed by an RN all day. And that's the increased cost for doing that. Our part-time RN has agreed to do the additional hours, and we'll be making that recommendation at the next meeting. And that's an additional $68,000 in cost. And building expenses. We've been, one of the larger ticket items here is the first item on the list. And what we decided to do, and as different kinds of things were coming out into the market, we had secured masks, we had secured shields, but in order to allow even students to have a space if they needed to eat a snack, we started to think about how are we going to accomplish that, and really and also ensuring that students had something around them to another layer of protection. And we first looked at it in some of the special ed spaces where we weren't sure if students would be able to keep the mask on or mask breaks. So what we ended up deciding to do is to purchase each student an individual shield. It's a 24 by 24 shield that goes on their desk, and they can carry it with them, and it'll be assigned to them. And then in addition to that, there's also partitions that we also purchased that we're going to need in areas where we're selling food, at the front desks where they don't exist, in some of the classrooms where they may be smaller, and we want to provide the teacher an additional shield if people are walking by their desk and different things. So they're very expensive, all these supplies, and right now we've spent almost $50,000 in securing those for both students and for staff where needed. Masks, these are additional masks we bought. We had purchased at the end of last year a lot of disposable masks. These are actually cloth masks that we also purchased for each teacher and each student, as well as face shields. We also purchased gowns, additional gowns. We had purchased some at the end of last year, but as we started to talk about it, we realized that in some of our classrooms, they also need to have some of those gowns and PPE available in classes where the aides or the teachers are closer to students and need to interact more with them. So we did purchase some additional PPE there. Floor signage, that's a big piece that most schools are using that to help designate as hallways and staircases as being one direction or another. And Joe has been working with the building levels, and we identified the amount that we would need, and we purchased those. MERF filters, this really comes from a recommendation from the HVAC audit, where this was actually not that what we had wasn't sufficient, but in areas we could increase and put a higher quality filter. We did based on the recommendation, and that's mostly in our gym spaces and all-purpose rooms where they were recommended for us to change those filters. Tissues, I know this seems like a small item here, but we wanted to make sure that we bought wipes and different things, but these were additional tissues up and above what we would normally have. Sometimes parents were asked to bring them in. We just wanted to make sure that, you know, each student would have, there'd be a plentiful amount of tissues in the classroom if anyone needed them. Another big ticket item, which I think was a really wise investment that the board agreed for the district to move forward with, was the HVAC audit and planning. And the engineers came in and did a very thorough investigation of all of our systems, spent a lot of time in our building, and in every, even small, you know, very small interior spaces they checked. And that was a professional, the majority of the cost there is the professional service, and the other half of that cost is for the remediation of that. So that's covering those ERVs we spoke about earlier in my report, purchase of those, and the various ceiling tiles, but mostly in the ERVs and the installation of those. That's where we're picking up the cost there. But that's actually money well spent, and we're bringing our building up to the highest compliance and making sure our ventilation is top notch. Beds for nurse's office, because we're going to have additional needed those 2 additional nurses' office. We also need to buy some beds for that space, which is reflected here. Nurses construction, that was on an earlier meeting. So one of both areas, nurses' offices are required to have a bathroom in the facility. That's a dedicated bathroom. So when we identified the most logical space for the second nurse's office in the Farragut complex at Hillside, there was an area which had a bathroom, but here we actually converted the facilities office, Joe's office, and the secretary, where we've relocated them, and there was a need to install a bathroom there. So the cost there is related to the install of that bathroom and the plumbing work, and also the supplies as well as the labor to do that work. We have some portable sinks that we ordered, and those are just to allow us to have additional hand washing stations. And if we can secure more of those, we're going to try to. They're on back order. They're very difficult to find, but we found that those would also be something that wouldn't go to waste, as they can be always used in our cafeteria, long-term upstairs in different areas, and they provide additional hand washing stations, which we thought was great. Cleaning supplies. We have not spent that extra $20,000 so far, but Joe and I, based upon, looking at the level of cleaning that's going to occur and thinking about those additional supplies that are going to be needed for the enhanced cleaning protocols, we're anticipating about $20,000. And I just wanted not to lose sight of that, earmarking that money for that. Alterra's planning. When we approved the Alterra's contract, we knew that part of the enhanced service this year was really help with the reopening plan and the training around that, and really assisting the district in, being an outside consultant, which I think was also a very worthwhile investment, considering, all the variables here in the planning of that, and also making sure that although whatever model we're in, we want to make sure we're staying compliant with all of our safety drills and making sure that those are all going out without a hitch. So that was an important component that we also needed to consider this year. Pod rental. We may end up renting more pods, because as we're going through spaces, we think we may need some more pods. So when we started to look at the classrooms and wanting to make sure that we can get all unnecessary things out of there. There's, many things in the classrooms are nice, different seating areas and things that we want to remove those so that we can gain more classroom space in there. And that's part of the reason we need to rent pods, because we only have so much storage space in the building. So there was some pods delivered today at Hillside. I think there's another one, coming here tomorrow. And, but I believe we may need some more now that we're kind of looking at, the amount of things that have to go in there. So that brings our current total at the building level expenses at $167,000. So right now we're running about $200,000 above what we had budgeted, more or less. And there are some budget transfers to the board tonight to approve to address these expenses. Like I said, the good news is we did have some money in our budget to address this. A lot of my counterparts, a lot of people, we didn't consider all these expenses. I think we had some sense there'd be some instructional expenses, but as time went on, the expenses continued to grow. But we wanted to make sure that the buildings were in good shape and we were addressing everything as things were coming up. I think we're in good shape now. I think, you know, I try to include everything, like I had mentioned, some of the expenses we haven't incurred yet, but we're anticipating incurring them. So I think that pretty much lays out, you know, where we are currently. And, you know, there may be some additional expenses, but I think that pretty much sums up, you know, everything we've been thinking about, and it kind of covers all the bases there of our COVID related expenses this year.
Thank you, Maureen. Any board members have any questions or comments about what Maureen has shared?
Hi, it's Sophia. You caught me off guard a little bit before. I wasn't expecting to be asked to say something tonight.
I'm really sorry. I just wanted to be sure you
No,
had
I'm grateful that you wanted me to speak. I do have some things I would like to say on behalf of the students.
Okay.
I'm hesitant to say most because I haven't talked to every student, but my friends who I've been talking to all would like to go back to school physically, whether it's hybrid or full. And you probably know that the 10706 Parents Facebook page has been really busy, and a lot of the comments from parents are that they're worried students won't keep their masks on. I think in the high school, students are more than capable and willing to keep their masks on. Additionally, there's been a petition going around on social media that's saying, if you sign this petition, we can have sports but no school. And that's how it's being advertised. But if you click on the petition and read it, it's for online only. But like what I'm seeing is sign this petition if you love sports and hate school, which is a little worrisome. But if that petition comes up, I would take it with a grain of salt because that's how it's been presented to the students. Yeah. One more thing, a lot of high schoolers have been feeling a bit frustrated because we don't get the emails directly. So we've been feeling a bit of a disconnect. So I don't know how to add other people to the district-wide emails, but I think it would be helpful for high school students to be added or to be on them. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Those are really helpful comments, and I appreciate you interjecting them into the meeting. I appreciate it. We were seeing the conclusion of Maureen's presentation about the expenses related to COVID-19, and I didn't know if any board members had any questions or comments about what she's shared with us.
No, I think, well, I'll just say something that I think we always knew that this was going to be somewhat of a big expense, an unknown expense. I've got some children being extremely loud behind me, so I apologize if there's some clanging going on. Yeah, I think originally we had conversations that it would be closer to the number we ended up at, 250, 300, and that because we were, and so I think there was actually, between Maureen and Joe and Valerie and Melissa, thinking through it, we probably were at the right number 3-4 months ago, but because we were doing so much hard work trying to figure out how to pull money out, we pulled some money out there, and then lo and behold, we ended up here. And I think the items on the list make a lot of sense. In particular, while it's frustrating to have to obviously spend $40,000 or $50,000 and whatever the cost to actually do some of the work on things like HVAC, audit and planning, it's obviously, and I don't think anyone on this call or anyone in the community would disagree with costs like that. So while frustrating and obviously at a time where we wouldn't want to be outlaying this kind of cash, I think it was all very prudent and probably actually very well planned early on. So thank you to the administration for doing that.
Yeah, and that's one of those investments. Like I said, it's actually an investment in our building, and it's not a waste of money because we've improved our HVAC system. So I think it's, there's most of the investments, even with the software, are money well spent. So I think that we're trying to, be mindful of as we make our decisions, we're always looking at the safety and security and making sure it all aligns with our plan.
I would jump in. I think I've unmuted myself. Maureen, I was wondering if that first item, the $50,000 item, we were looking at both partitions and personal barriers for the students. Can you state the number, or do you know the number? Did we buy enough for 50% capacity, or did we buy enough for close to 1,500 if we were at full capacity?
We bought one for we bought one for each student. Each student, we bought like 1,700 of them. Each student has a partition, and they're going to be tagged with their student's name because they'll take them with them.
That sounds amazing. It's difficult to, you know, plan and work and purchase in such a cloudy July, but that is a number that I think the public is glad to hear. Thank you, Maureen.
You're welcome.
Were there any other additional comments from the board on the expense information that Maureen just shared? Okay, the next part of our meeting is to help the board better understand some of the questions that have been emerging and remain within the community regarding the reopening planning. And I just wanted, before we begin this conversation, really address the fact that navigating this much uncertainty for so many months is making us all really vulnerable to a lot of frustrations and sometimes angers. And it's an unfortunate outcome of that sometimes that constant feeling of uncertainty makes us rely on more selfish or divisive forms of thought or communication. And this is not just happening in Hastings, it's happening nationwide. So it's no fault to our own. I just want to encourage us all to remain strong. We've come this far in Hastings, as one of the public commenters mentioned. Our infection rate is remarkably low, considering where we were in March. But it hasn't been easy, and it's certainly not over yet. And the reopening of the schools it's not our destination. That's really, the reopening of our schools is really a playbook and a map to get us to the other side of this. That's the destination. So with that, I know that the board has prepared a number of questions. I'm going to try to pull them up. And we started really just is seeing that there are three interconnected and complex questions that bring this all to the fore. How do we keep everyone safe, everyone in the system, district staff, students, and families? How do we create a productive learning environment for our students under the current circumstances? And how do we support parents in the system as they have a variety of competing demands? And I know that there was a very invested and dedicated reopening planning committee that Superintendent Valerie Henning-Peanut put together. It had approximately 50 stakeholders representing parents, teachers, custodians, students, and nonetheless, there are still questions that, of course, emerge, particularly with the news from Cuomo last Friday that we can continue opening schools, which is a good news, but many districts, including ours, were expecting that there might be something more definitive rather than the news that we got from him that we should look at our plan and then make a decision locally to what makes sense. So the first question that the board wanted to discuss with the administration was really about the current plan. And there's a sense that the hybrid 2-day is a conclusion, that decision has been made. And we just wanted to talk out really where we are in the process, where really are we? Has that decision been made? And then moving forward, how will that decision be made? So I don't know if Valerie, if you wanted to begin the discussion on that overarching question.
Sure. No, thank you, Lauren. So this notion of how do we keep everyone safe in the system, Lauren, was that the question?
The real question, I think, was, is it a foregone conclusion that we're going to this 2-day hybrid model?
Okay. We have not made a decision about which of the models, whether it is the everyone on campus model, the hybrid density model, where 50% of the students across each grade level are in the school district in a variety of ways, whether it's the three sort of hybrid models that we looked at, which was the every other day rotation, and Wednesday is the flex day, and the other 2 days, the other half of the class comes in, so an every other day rotation or a 2 consecutive day rotation. And the other model that we asked for community feedback on was
can we stop this? Can you get him off or something?
maybe we should remind
I'm
everyone
going to mute everybody, and then Valerie, can you unmute yourself, please? I'm going to mute everyone, and then you'll unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, Janine. So like other school districts, the other 699 school districts in the state, we followed the framework that we were asked to design a methodology for reopening in those 3 ways. Every student on campus, half of the students on campus, and all the students learning virtually from home. So those are the parameters. The school districts, certainly in this region, looked at some of the same kind of hybrid models, but at no point were had we made any decision. I don't think any of you have received a communication from me stating that we've made a decision nor dismissed, any model, with the exception of to point out in Friday's communication that it wasn't feasible, and we certainly have some information from our building leaders with regards to why that was a conclusion for us. So the governor placed in our hands the task of choosing which way to reopen, and there has been no decision made. The decision will come out of us carefully reviewing any information that we have through our forums, through feedback that we've received from different individuals who have specific questions about certain parts of how we arrived at a decision. But every school district and every superintendent I've been in contact with are in the same position of now needing to make a decision about how we will reopen as a result of the governor indicating that we could reopen, and the reopening will occur in one of those 3 models.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that, Valerie? Thanks. So as we think about, so one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is kind of what is the framing question that is framing our planning? Like how are we driving it? And those top 3 I think are good as far as kind of almost concerns, those very top 3 at this page that we wrote. And I'm wondering if it changes the planning or it changes thinking. I mean, if you think about, for example, I'm familiar in my business with Agile and Agile software development, Agile enterprise planning, and things of that nature. And one of the lessons in that sort of dynamic innovative planning methodology is you start with the customer need. You start with where you're trying to get to, and then you kind of work all processes back from there. And is it appropriate right now to ask a question that is, how do we all get back, right? How do we get us back to 100%? And we could go through some exercises. We could say, well, we could do A, we could do B, we could do this, we could do this. This is going to have this price tag, this is going to have that price tag. And as we go through that exercise, we end up and we say, hey, that's a path and we could take it, or that's not a path and we can't take it. But at least we can see the options. I think one of the things that's been hard for me personally as a board member is not seeing some of that decision making, which isn't really a fault of anyone in the administration. No one has had to do this sort of planning before. So I think we're all kind of figuring this out at the same time. But having said that, you know, I wonder that I wonder if you know, so for example, some of these sub questions in here, the idea that can we, so here's a question, can we ask families, there's a portion of families, I don't think we know exactly how big that portion is, that are going to say either for very specific medical reasons or for other safety concerns, they just do not want their kids coming back to school. You know, maybe that's for the semester, maybe it's for the year. And I think it'd be really helpful to know, like, how big is that population? Is that 5%? Is that 7%? Is that 10%? Is that 15%? It seems to me that that could play into some of the density planning, right? That now what that is predicated on is that we feel comfortable saying there is an option to be stay at home, right? That is an option, which then raises, you know, another question, which is, you know, if we've got kids in the schools 5 days a week, and that's a slightly lower density, let's for round numbers call that 15% lower density because of people opting out, can we then, and I think this gets a little bit what Andy Zimmerman was asking, can we then give a dedicated set of teachers to those 15%? That would be kind of an all kind of remote learning process, and then figure out with that remaining 85% or whatever that number is, what does it look like then? You know, is that possible? And we still may come to the answer, it's not possible. But you may have considered everything I'm raising and may have thoughts and reactions to that. And it'd be great to hear just any of your thinking on those, you know, those specific topics. You know, especially kind of specifically, can we ask those families? Can we figure out if we can give a remote option? And can that reduce density?
Sure. So what we know for sure is our current enrollment of 1,686 students. So we make all of our decisions on the basis of that. If that number, you know, stays the same as we go into whichever model we choose, you know, that, you know, which means that none of our parents have withdrawn their children. So that's the only way we would basically be able to determine whether there's a reduction in enrollment. Therefore, that would impact, let's say, the numbers of teachers that we have and the numbers of classes, you know, that those teachers would cover. So, so that's one factor, our current enrollment. So if we don't see any decrease in the current enrollment, there's no way for us to verify that, you know, that parents are choosing to, you know, keep their children at home and have them access the remote only option. Parents certainly can tell us that they, you know, are thinking that way. As we know, there's nothing firm about saying that this is what you plan on doing now until, you know, September 8th, which is technically our first day that we are open. Whatever, you know, open means that's the first day. So we have no way of asking parents to, you know, tell us, you know, give us sort of the, you know, an absolute decision on whether or not they are planning to, you know, to have their children remain home. So it's a really, you know, unstable foundation for planning. I'll put it that way. So we don't really know until September 8th whether or not those parents plan on executing their, you know, their own plan with regards to staying at home. We also know a lot can change between now and September 8th which will also, impact their decision. So as much as we would like to, factor that in as a number, which would help us, potentially, add another 2 desks to a classroom, we don't have firm information that would help us to make that decision comfortably. So we could end up, if we did it prematurely, we could end up increasing classes, taking too much furniture out, not taking enough furniture out, and then we would have, a set of other things that we have to look at. So we have to get closer to September 8th before we know for sure, what's happening, which then, doesn't mean it's too late then after September 8th, to make some adjustments in how we have set up our, the numbers of desks or chairs in a classroom. In terms of teachers, dedicated teachers to be used in a remote model, every teacher that we have has a roster of students. So there are no extra teachers that we can pull from the mix and say, okay, you're going to now be the remote teachers, and do that, from your home or do that from one of the buildings. So, while there could be, school districts that have staff members who are used differently from us, we don't have a single teacher who is not connected to a roster, and therefore there's no one, there's no way for us to peel that person off. It becomes even more difficult at the upper levels, and when you get to middle school and high school, because certification drives how we can use teachers. So it certainly does the same at the elementary level, where your certification is what determines where we can place you. So right now, as of the teachers that we have in our district, everyone's attached to a group of students. So there is there's not an extra teacher available. The only place that we could potentially use a teacher who we would have under our employ would be a substitute teacher. Substitute teachers are certified. They may not be certified in certain areas where you need that remote teacher. So if you have a group of high school students who are learning trigonometry, you may not have a substitute teacher who can offer that kind of cover that kind of course, and similarly to any other part of the school system. So those are the sort of knowns that come with making the decision around what the degree to which we're comfortable going out with a speculative number with regards to how many parents may plan to keep their children at home, whether it's because the child is a medical condition, perhaps their parents are not comfortable with their child coming to school, or that they are just not feeling safe, or that they have some other options that they're entertaining.
Can I ask a quick question? Is there a date that people have to let us know if they don't want to send their kid? Because I know they have to send a plan to Melissa, or they have to get sign off. So is there a date that we could say by August 20th or August 25th, we need to know, and then we can do a survey at that point, or look at the numbers at that point, rather than having to wait till September 8th?
I have to think that's the cart before the horse a little bit, Jeremy. I guess my question, Valerie, and I'll say why, is you said we have to.
I wanted to hear what she was going to answer.
All right. Good.
So you're talking about the individualized home instruction plan, which is if a parent would like to homeschool under New York State regulations, homeschool their child, they would certainly submit that, and that there is a deadline around that particular process, Jeremy. So they'd have to submit the individualized home instruction plan to Melissa, and Melissa would approve that. So that's sort of one category of how we would know whether someone intends to keep their children in the school district.
And what's the date on that? Do you know?
It may be the end of. Go ahead, Melissa.
It's a couple of weeks before the start of school. I can get you an exact date, but I'm pretty sure from memory it's about 14 days. So I'll be popping in
for the start of school
regs on that. And just to add, so the secondary thing is that you know, there will be parents who are still keeping their students at home that are not planning to go the home instruction route. They're planning to go the remote instruction account and keep their kids enrolled in district. So that's the second group as well.
I just wanted to add, because I've been thinking a lot about this question, because I know a lot, and many folks in the community have been talking about this idea of polling to see, you know, how many families would commit to being remote so that a density could be calculated. The sort of problematic aspect of that is that, let's say we needed 35 to 40% to commit to this idea. That's just an arbitrary number. That's not based on any fact, I know. It wouldn't be across every grade level that you'd see that. So you might have, you know, 80% of kindergarten that says that, and 10% of second grade, and, you know, 6% of seventh grade, and it adds up to the right amount, but you can't staff accordingly to solve the issue of density. That's another way to explain why that becomes complicated.
That's right. It could fall across any grade level, any content area. So even if we got, you know, even if 10 parents committed, you know, at this point, you know, we would know sort of where, you know, the ages and grade levels of their children. But that still wouldn't necessarily lead to an extra teacher. I mean, the average class size, you know, let's say at, you know, the elementary level, is around 20, 21 students. So basically 21 students from the elementary school would have to be, the parents would have to homeschool them and remove them from the system if we were to have, you know, to get an additional teacher then who could become a remote, you know, educator, you know, or someone who can provide remote, you know, instruction. So that, you know, so that particular piece, that the numbers are tricky with regards to, again, you know, not only the commitment, you know, and whether that commitment is binding, which I think our council would say it is not. So even if I said yes today, and on September 7th, I said, you know what, I changed my mind. You know, the child is still enrolled in the school district. So I think, you know, we certainly can ask parents, you know, where they are right now. I think some of the decision will be predicated upon the remote instruction plan that Melissa's working on with educators and administrators. You know, once parents hear, you know, what that experience is, you know, that may also cause them to think about, you know, not going with the remote option, because it isn't like there's a teacher teaching their child over, you know, virtually. If they are accessing instruction remotely on that day, whether they're in, you know, any of the hybrid models. So I think that once the plan is developed, which we'll see on Friday, that's also another factor, you know, for parents to consider with regards to whether they want to enroll their children, you know, and be assigned to the gold or green group according to their grade level, or if they still want to go the remote route, which, as I said, since it hasn't been described in great detail, may cause them to, you know, to reconsider.
Valerie, I'm sorry, it's Lou. Do you mind if I jump in for 2 seconds?
Go right ahead.
Okay, I just want to stress, I know both you and Lauren both made the point that as the older the grades or the higher the grades go, the more complex things go. But I can tell you from grade 7, 12, every teacher's certification is dependent on, you know, whether they're math, science, social studies. It's not a general license. And, you know, just I'll give you an example. For a 9th grade student coming into the high school, there are 4 possibilities and levels of mathematics, just for a 9th grader, and that, you know, doubles as they get older. So to say that we want to dedicate a math teacher, a social studies teacher, or a science teacher, which you can't, because remember, science certification is earth science, biology, chemistry. It's not just science. It becomes even more difficult. The pure numbers just don't work at a high school because of all the different courses that students take. So even if we had 20 or 30 students at the high school who decided to do a full remote, we could never dedicate just one teacher to teach those students outside of the high school. It just doesn't work.
Thank you, Lou.
Can I get a point of clarification, Valerie? So are we, whether we're at hybrid or if we're all remote, we're all remote, and that's what that is, right? So whether we're at all students in school or hybrid, is an option going to be remote for families? Is that an option, or is it only if you produce a letter that's medical exempting you from coming to school?
No, remote is an option if we are in, if we're in school. So if we were on campus and if there was a family that said, I'm not comfortable, or my child has an underlying medical condition, that is, we are allowing families to say, we would rather, have our child, access the classroom instruction remotely. But again, as I said, what that means, may not be what the parent expects. So, I mean, again, we are, our constraints have to do with the fact that, we've never done this before. We've never had to even consider having children sitting in front of teachers who are, who have to have instruction, and students accessing that classroom from home. That is completely new territory. And, I can tell you there's a lot of concern about that model. And what, Melissa and the administrators and teachers are working through is how realistic is that? And, we're not going to offer anything that, obviously the teachers, are not, have not been in any position to learn how to do that. There's no playbook anywhere that they can, that we can offer to them. And for children and for families, we wouldn't want to promote that as a model that we have a lot of, security around, because again, we don't have any precedent, with regards to having used it. So what is, what is being developed is what's realistic. There is a computer in the classroom that won't have it, there's a webcam that's connected to it that will be stationary. It is not moving. The teacher, is not, teaching to the children in the classroom and then running over and doing and engaging with the children during video conferencing. So that in and of itself is, kind of like one of the starting points around, around our capacity. So, and bandwidth is also another, major factor. So, it's my thinking that once, parents who may think that that's, the best option may find that that isn't what we can actually deliver. And while we, have been working, Melissa in particular, since March to, gather all of the, feedback with regards to some of the things that are different. Certainly one of the major differences that parents will see is that we will have, it'll be a regular day. So the child's schedule or the teacher's schedule is what will be followed. So it won't matter. So there should be a lot of similarities in terms of, what happens in the brick and mortar classroom and what happens in the virtual classroom. And of course, lots of, discussions around what, how dynamic and student-centered is that instruction. So all those details are being worked out with the, with the professionals who know what, who would bring a lot of expertise to those areas. And so, we're really looking at, wanting, making sure that, Google Classroom is used in a way that, it is consistent, whether I'm a kindergartner or a ninth grader, the way that it's organized is consistent. So that's been a large, work that has been done with a committee of about 21 teachers. We also, from that group, looked at how to use Google Calendar consistently. That was also feedback from all the whether it's the superintendent's chat or it was the home health hour that Lupin Ramsey was the moderator of, and feedback from from not only parents, educators, students. So there are certain things, those are the specifics that are going to change in terms of the starting points. And then, as I said, really looking at, what is it that, we can, what would that virtual experience look like, and what would the classroom experience look like, and what's realistic, to actually do. So that's going to drive, I think, a lot of what, we may hear from parents after they see that the remote learning plan.
Thank you, Valerie. I know that having a separate remote learning plan that is differentiated outside of the reopening plan was part of what the governor requested as of last Friday. So I know that, Melissa, you've been spearheading that. And I don't know if, one of the questions the board has put forward is this idea of making a live stream classroom look or feel different depending on the developmental age or the grade level of our students, and sort of the fact that modality is more optimal for as a high schooler or older middle schooler, but less optimal for the elementary school. And I didn't know if you could briefly let us know how that discussion is going amongst the group that's putting the learning plan together.
Sure, I'm happy to. So it has been front and center in our discussions. So when we are doing our planning, that live streaming and instruction group is thinking really about the arc between the elementary school, the middle school, the high school, which things need to be consistent and which things don't. So for example, taking period by period attendance, that would look very different at the elementary level. So at the high school level, if students could, for example, and again, we're still working it through, could throw their name in the chat, and then that's very easy to say, okay, all of these students are here. It's a quick way to take the attendance. That is very difficult for a 5-year-old to spend time typing their name in a chat. So we are absolutely working through each of those things. One of the questions that the board raised was around this idea of the possibility of, redeploying teachers if we have a number of students staying home. And to everything that Valerie said, there are real logistical challenges around that and equity issues around that. However, we are having conversations around how to get creative, knowing that our elementary students, especially our early elementary, need a higher level of support. And that is a true, real, lived experience. So we're thinking about support staff and what can that look like. We're looking at, thinking about which portions of the lesson would younger students need more support in terms of the sharing or the collaboration. So we're working through it, and we are concurrently saying, here are the things that we believe need to be consistent in terms of our framework, in terms of our practice, and then how it gets operationalized. We're working through at each of the building levels.
Thanks, Melissa. The next group of questions we have were around safety protocols in the physical space. And I don't know, Janine, if you can pull up, there's another document within this area in board docs that has been prepared with the classroom spacing. Specifically, the board is asked to see some visuals of what the 3 buildings would look like with distance spacing, and they're available for us. And I don't know if the principals are on the call, if they want to talk about those, Valerie, or if that's something that you wanted to do.
They actually can speak to this. They also prepared a document that was also uploaded to this agenda item, and it contains 4 questions that and a few of them have to do with how they made decisions regarding the feasibility of an all-in model and hybrid model, and what the capacity challenges would be if they had if all of our students with IEPs were in and all of our students who were English language learners were in. So they're best equipped to speak specifically because they've been in the room with Joe and Maureen and our custodial team, looking at the footprint in the classroom and determining what would a reduced model, a reduced number of students look like in that classroom. Like what would have to be in the classroom, what would have to be removed from the classroom if we had to maintain, under the New York State Department of Health guidelines, 6 feet of space in all directions of each individual student. So why don't we start with Jennifer? Jennifer Spirelli. You can start looking at this particular, or speaking, or taking.
Okay, I don't mind going first, Valerie, if you don't mind. If that's okay.
Yeah, the one that's up, Lou,
I
is
think we put Farragut Complex. I think it includes both middle school and high school. Yeah, because I sent the photos to Janine, the ones I just snapped today with Joe.
Yeah, that's actually a high school room.
That's a high school room, yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, I don't mind starting. I mean, we've started the arduous task of going around to different rooms and kind of setting them up and mocking them as far as the social distance piece is concerned. As if you could see in those pictures, and thank you to Maureen and Joe for assisting us all in this. Those desks are set up 6 feet all around from center. And by doing that, we realized that especially I can speak for the high school, that all the rooms are different sizes. Quite frankly, they range anywhere from 660 square feet up to, quite frankly, almost 800 square feet in the science rooms. But, because of the configurations, the layouts, furniture, and so forth, most classrooms are going to be max somewhere around the 14 range, 14, maybe 15 students at max. And if, it depends on the number, those of you who know the high school schedule, we can max a class at 27 for most of our classes. Our science lab classes max at 24 students. And, if you do straight math, that works. But when, if we are intending on bringing in all students with IEPs every day for the 4 days, that complicates things a little bit. It's not terrible, but we're going to have to be strategic. And I met with my faculty today and let them know that, the real estate is no longer, the deeds are going to be broken and the leases are going to be broken as far as real estate and classrooms are concerned. And that we're going to look at strictly at numbers. And if I need to move some classes to a math room because that has a bigger footprint and I can put more students in there, I'm going to do that, even if it's an English class, and so forth and so on. We're going to use big spaces such as the auditorium and the Cochrane gym. We have 2 sides of the Cochrane gym. We can also use the lecture room. We'll share with the middle school, of course, the library space. They're all big spaces. And of course, we're going to encourage any teachers who want to bring their classes outside to do that as well. But we're going to look hard at our class lists and rosters and really strategically place classes in places that we can maintain both social distancing and enforce the mask rule. And as you can see, as you're scrolling through, those are what the classrooms look like. And you can also, kudos to Joe Moderano and his staff, you can see how beautifully clean those rooms are as well. So that's pretty much what I have from the high school. Jennifer, you're up.
Yeah, scroll down.
Thank you, Lou. That was a really good summary to begin with. And the middle school is facing very similar concerns and hurdles to leap over with this. Just to echo again, I think what was already said, that the invitation for our IEP students and ENL students to come in the 4 days does shift our numbers for the green and the gold groups. So looking at that, if our ICT classes numbers are higher, we want to still be able to provide the best instruction possible and give those supports. Looking at even opportunities to explore other classrooms. So that meaning that the co-teacher model would be split and the 2 teachers would be separated into 2 different rooms, just like they would maybe following a model of inclusion for parallel teaching, a strategy used. They might be doing parallel teaching, but within 2 different classrooms. So we're trying to just be very creative and thoughtful and finding ways to maintain the social distancing with the spacing that we have. And again, looking as Lou said, considering the rooms and the numbers, that kind of takes precedent over, you know, where teachers have been in the past. So.
John, if you're there. Or...
Sure, I'm here. Just kind of piggybacking on what Jennifer and Lou have already stated, the classrooms, as you can see, at Hillside and at the elementary level, have a little bit more furniture that we are, you know, working with our teachers and our you know, buildings and grounds team. As you can see there, there's a few tables that are set up in the classroom, which are very common throughout Hillside, throughout all grade levels. And then there's a few desks at the front of the classroom where the, you know, most likely the teacher's desk and the smart board is located. The square footage for the classrooms at Hillside definitely varies, anywhere from approximately 710 square feet to a little over 1,000, which are our current kindergarten classrooms, and for most of our typical instructional spaces. Again, based on the square footage in each of these classrooms, we are looking at anywhere between 11 to 13 or 14 students if the classes were to be split, and also considering the staff members that would be part of the classrooms as well. You know, as we prepare for September, again, just like Jennifer was saying before, and Lou, looking at alternative spaces such as our all-purpose room, library, and other special area classrooms for our larger sections on each grade level. And again, you know, continuing to work with Joe and Maureen and their staff to find, you know, solutions to the issues at hand.
Valerie, can I just jump in just to also talk about, so obviously some of these classrooms, as we've been talking about, we are removing any unnecessary items into a pod. So even if they exist here, we'll be shifting them. The other idea is we're trying to get a sense of our single desks that either, if we're clearing out furniture here, that could be repurposed so that we can remove some of these tables out. So we're also in the process of doing that. So that would help in that, you know, space where if we're taking, you know, 10 out of a classroom here, you know, we're looking to shift that too, and just be flexible. So if we're in a hybrid model, then, you know, we'll be shifting some furniture around. And then the other piece that Joe, and I didn't mention in the COVID expenses we're investigating, is also thinking about maybe having some more permanent type room dividers potentially installed in some of our larger spaces. We had looked at that as part of the bond at one point when we were looking at dividing spaces. So we did have some figures around that, but we're just, you know, just getting a sense. So we'll have maximum flexibility looking at either putting some type of soundproof dividers in gym spaces, the cafe at Hillside or the small gym, and just to give us a sense. So if we needed to use any of those spaces, it would provide a better, a soundproof space for people who are using it.
So Maureen and Joe and our technology team and Lyric have been working very diligently on the informational tech end of things to make sure that everything is up and ready to rock with bandwidth and being able to test things. We are also starting to beta test from an instructional end starting tomorrow. We have a teacher volunteer coming in, you know, with a mask, with a face shield. We're going to test the headsets. We're going to actually try to operationalize it with a student remotely. And I also offered that opportunity to the faculty throughout the district earlier today, because we also want to see, you know, what does it really look like from the teacher standpoint, from the student in the home environment, actually on the receiving end. So we're in the process of doing that as well. We'd like to take the opportunity to give a shout out to the administrators who have been just working absolutely tirelessly behind the scenes on so many pieces. I mean, so many moving parts. And the minute we think we have something, we have a new mandate coming down the pike. So we just wanted to also recognize all of the support and collaboration. It's been truly incredible. And I know we've used the word unprecedented so many times, but it is really, truly moving quickly. So we're trying to balance being effective, being efficient. The two don't always go together very well, but we are certainly trying our best. And I just wanted to say thank you because there's a lot going on.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Jody Meyer had her hand raised. Jody?
Allison, you also wanted to say something.
This related to the prior discussion, and I know there's so many variables, so many things up in the air, and it's constantly changing parts. I guess my question had to do with a comment that you made, Valerie, about having to wait till closer to September 8th. And I guess I'm wondering, I'm not quite sure what that means. At what point will people know? Because I'm thinking that for teachers and for families, people need to know, or need to know when they're going to know, so they can, whether they like what they find out or not, people are going to have to adjust accordingly. And I think it's just making people more anxious, not knowing when that's going to be.
Oh, what we do know is, I mean, again, these are, so parents have a choice to keep their child at home if, again, under the parameters that are, we're honoring, that are outlined in the state guidance. If a child has an underlying medical condition, the parent can have the child stay home. If the parent is uncomfortable, to send their child to school, the parent may keep their child at home and access remote learning. So we don't have a way to know what's going to change. What we do know is that there's been change every week. The curveball that the governor threw us on Friday. We'd all been sort of waiting. We met the deadline, for submitting the plans, and having make sure that our plans conform to all the requirements. The other issue that's not clear from the standpoint of the guidance document, and it's certainly a conversation that's happening among superintendents, that while school districts are certainly honoring the parent request to for those reasons that I mentioned earlier, to keep their child at home but to access remote learning, the state has not really rendered a decision on what that means. Is that counted as school? And we may very well get a decision that kind of sort of renders remote learning, unless you're in your green or gold group during the hybrid model, that says that that isn't considered, and it won't, it doesn't count as school. And that's a conversation that came up today, for example, across school districts that were contemplating, well, where is that in the guidance document? How do we know that for certain? So that could change. I hate to say that because it's probably includes more anxiety, but that is a reality, and I'd rather say it now, on the basis of hearing that conversation today, that we could have some opinion, from the state ed department that says, that isn't called school. You have to, be in some way or another. I don't know that. I haven't read anything. It's just a, sharing just a, piece of information that came out of a discussion, today. So there, so those kinds of things keep emerging. And then, as we get closer to, some of the murkier parts of this that we need some guidance around from the state, with regards to, or are we going, is the school district going to be penalized? Because I do understand some school districts north of us have already made a decision, with regards to which model they're going to use. But, there may be something that, tilts us in one direction or the other. So that's how uncertain it has been, with regards to trying to make sure, that we account for everything, in our plan. And at the same time, there's still moving parts, in all of this. And, as early as today, the directions or the guidance from the Westchester County Health Department we didn't, we were waiting on this, and we just got it today, at the end of today. So, even important pieces of information like this, which you would think would be on the front end of the process, we have it now that the plan has been added to our website. So, I don't know if that's if any of that is any kind of an explanation, Jody, with regards to, the uncertainty, but I think, all of that is a pretty good characterization of like where we've been in terms of, really, remaining as flexible as we can, being accommodating to the degree that we can, but knowing that any and all of that could shift, in some direction or another that we just really don't have any control over.
Allison, you wanted to make a comment or?
I'm just processing what Valerie just said.
Yeah.
I keep imagining that there will be a date where we will at least state what we're doing, and then teachers start preparing for that and collaborating to make it the best they can. And then if, infection rates went up or something, then obviously we would have to pivot. But anyway, my original question is that hearing the principals present and showing us those pictures of the classroom, and thank you for doing that for us, the visual part. It looks like there isn't a way to get all of the students into one classroom. When the principals were talking about using some alternate spaces, that was to accommodate half the class, correct? And the students with IEPs who would be coming 4 days, right? Not the entire 27 children.
That's correct.
Right? So it does sound like from what's been presented tonight that full attendance, full in-person attendance is not feasible.
Well, if we're following the health department guidelines, which, are, embedded in the documents that, were used to build our school reopening plan, it states pretty clearly 6 feet of space in all directions between students. And the other part of that, or use an appropriate physical barrier between individuals that do not adversely affect airflow, heating, cooling, or ventilation, or otherwise present a health or safety risk.
So you mentioned earlier that we will have those barriers. Is it your understanding then that even with those we cannot put desks closer than the 6 feet then?
Well, we would have to certainly see what those barriers would, what they are and to what degree they offer the kind of protection. Now, keep in mind what Lou said about 27 students in a classroom. You're going to add a barrier around each part of that child's desk. It's going to be a safety hazard. So we're not even going to be able to manage it in that environment, and the fire department is not going to allow us to even set up a classroom like that. So, that would be a concern is, and just taking that example from Lou about that's a class can be as large as that. If we have, if we have appropriate barriers that would divide students, on all sides, not just the front. They have to be divided all around, the front, the back, the side. So,
and that's not what we've ordered. We ordered something for in front, right?
We ordered in between. Children have, as Maureen described, a shield. Of course, they have their mask. They have a face shield if they, cough shield. So they have some of those basics which they can, they can place on their individual desks. But in terms of, that may not be, enough of a protection if that's to be used in lieu of 6 feet, around children, around each child. Mm-hmm. So, we certainly, will, have purchased everything that we can, use to make sure that we can plan for any scenario. And obviously planning to want is, to have, children in the school, and planning for offices, spaces that we can have those clear barriers. But
right.
take quite a lot to I think meet that expectation, and probably the expense of that would probably be pretty terrific as well. But
Pretty awkward to be walking around.
Asked us to look into that. If you asked us to take a class of I don't know, like an elementary classroom, since that's where the children will have the most difficulty, and erect those barriers and see how see what that would look like. We could certainly create a model to demonstrate what it would what that would look like, or if it's better to have a socially distanced classroom where children can move around rather than being like cocooned in these little things.
Yeah, I think
really picture kids carrying around their plastic boxes from room to room. But I am trying to get to the point that Jody was making earlier. How do we get from our understanding tonight to a decision, and then say with the understanding, with the caveat that we may have to pivot from this if conditions change or if the state changes its mind somehow, because as you said, Valerie, that has happened a lot, that they suddenly supply new information and have new demands for you all. It happens daily practically. But is there a scenario where we would make a choice like that? This is what teachers and administrators have decided is best for kids. This is our decision, unless we're suddenly put on another course.
Well, are we talking about the making a decision on parents who are choosing to keep their children at home, or the decision around which of the three models we're going with?
Which of the three models?
Yeah,
well,
I think also Jody was asking that question too.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
About the timing of when we'll hear your decision about which of the three models is ideal to move forward with.
Sure. Well, we have, we've had some of our forums, and we're asked to, make sure that we have our remote plan on our website, the last piece, plus, the contact tracing information, the COVID-19 testing information. And all of this is to conclude by August 21st. So, and school is scheduled to open on September 8th. I have not seen the date that the state is asking us to upload the plan to some other place besides our website. But I would say around that time, August 21st, that's the time that a collaborative decision between including all the information that's available in terms of what we've all shared, all of the administrators and are in their own groups across the region having the same conversations, the same from the standpoint of the conversations I've been having with the superintendents. I would say the decision that is not just my decision, it would be in collaboration with the board, after looking at everything that we've looked at, not a change in the plan, but a decision. Are we going to open and have every child in in our schools? Are we going to open in a remote environment? Or are we going to open in a hybrid model? So if the decision, if August 21st is a date that that the governor mentioned on Friday, I would imagine that would be the time to no later than that's the 21st, but certainly no later than the the 24th. But we should be making an announcement, I would say, within that time, and we have a board meeting scheduled on August 26th. So I would say within that window of time between August 21st, that's next week, and August, between August 21st and August 26th, I think that's the window of time that, we would have concluded all of our forums. And, if there was any new information, certainly it would be coming, we would have that available to make a decision. And we're certainly going to hear a lot that's happening in the region. As I said, a couple of school districts north of us have already made a decision, and that's probably going to be happening regularly. And as we know, all districts are compared to each other. So, there's going to be some regional trends as well. So, and that's where we are at this point in terms of considering, certainly, we've heard, that the American Federation of Teachers has made it clear, in their pronouncement about, ensuring the safety of educators, and, that's obviously the safety of children and every adult in our school district. So safety is a priority. I think, there are some legitimate fears when parents keep their children at home because of underlying medical conditions. And as we listen to the news, every day with regards to cases that are happening in other states, that's certainly, weigh heavily on, on everyone's sort of thinking about, what is that, what are the implications of that for us? We could have a decision from the county executive, the county executive's office. We could have, the county executive has, issued an opinion in the past when we were at that place where, we were waiting for, a decision around, when can we go out and how many days can the county executive, allow us to be out, and, and whether he can make that decision. So there are other, factors that, just based upon, what we have, experienced since March, that, we could certainly learn that would impact our decision.
Thank you. Lauren, could I jump in there for a while if I have a good connection?
Sure, go ahead, Jeff.
All right, thank you. Valerie, and thank you for the chance. I know this Thursday we're going to get in the building and try just looking a little bit about those models. If I could speak to John, the cams just for a second. John, in your photos, it didn't seem like you were using the most efficient desks. I know that Hillside is a very particular concern because it's not just school districts to our north, it's school districts to our south. Bronxville has announced things that have interested our community, and we've seen that in emails from our residents. John, in the photos for Hillside, was there ever a time where you just used chairs instead of these long desks? And I ask that because Maureen mentioned that there might be a consideration about moving the single desks around. And I know in my classroom, high school desks can easily be lowered. So was there ever a time where you took out those tables in these, not just the biggest rooms, but to see how many 6x6 grids we could get with just chairs, John?
Yeah, we haven't in particular actually done that and set that up, but like as Maureen stated before, we are taking a look at other furniture, across the district that could be utilized. It's just that at the current time, the majority of our classrooms at Hillside, that is the tables that you can see in some of the pictures, the longer tables that are colored are available. And but it is something that we are considering and taking a look at, depending on the numbers that we have in each classroom, based on the information that we're getting, for students that are going to be in each on each roster.
I also
thank you, John. And a follow up then. I'm sorry, Amy. I apologize. Yep.
No worries. I just wanted to chime in there. We also have some classrooms who have not moved to the lattice structure with furniture. So we still have some desks in about 8 of our classrooms. So we've looked at separating those desks into 2 groups so that 2 classrooms can have those desks. So it's not only tables that we have at Hillside, but we do have a large number of classrooms that have tables. Just wanted to let you know that as well.
Thank you. No, thank you. This was specifically trying to keep a full option model on the table, because I think we wouldn't want to separate those into two classes. We want to see, can 20 chairs get into a room if we had the more efficient single desks that we know we have throughout the district. Amy, would you be able to say what is the largest class size we would have if, based on last year when there were no parents opting for fully remote at Hillside? Did we go
Yes.
above 20 or 21?
23 is our largest class size right now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And then Valerie, I think something that was picked up on, because the Friday email definitely made it sound like we were down to 2 options. And now Monday's statement sounds like we have 3 options on the table, which was confusing to a lot of our residents so far. I think one idea, not that we want to push below 6 feet, but that was to keep the full option on them, to keep it still in consideration. That would be the statement that Hillside could only do full modeling if we went below 6 feet, not as much that it's off.
Well, it depends on whether, again, we can maintain social distancing. 6 feet in all directions of the children, or have an appropriate physical barrier. So in none of the models do we see any physical barriers that would help us to to answer that question, Jeremy. I mean, we'd have to basically see what that would look like. If is it feasible once you have every child in a classroom where there's communal seating, look at the assortment of barriers that have been purchased, set that up and see what that would look like, and bring the teacher in there and the teacher assistant or aides and others who are in the classroom, along with the parents, and see how people feel about that. I think that's the only way to really know, whether that's a place where what impact that would have on the teacher's ability to teach, and what impact it would have on the children. So I think that I would recommend that take place, that we actually set up a mock classroom and see how that actually looks, and that's the only way to really sort of know. And I think that would be take a little video of that and show that to parents. Do it at Hillside, do it at the middle school, and do it at the high school. And that way we have, concrete, information to actually look at and determine, is it possible, which is feasible, to be 6 feet apart in each direction, or is it to be able to also, because the guidance document says, or use an appropriate physical barrier between the individuals that don't obstruct, airflow and so forth.
And that point, thank you, Valerie. Is there the wording, you made it sound like it was a box on all sides, which is very visual. Is it as clear as that, or is it the trifold desks that we've purchased? We purchased 1,700 of them. Would that, is that clear that would not count towards that or qualification? Because that seemed to be if we put the desks and used what our version of barriers, not a box around the students, the desktop version, and used masks. Is it clear that it would have to be on all sides?
Well, it says in between. So the back, if you're covered in 3, the front and the side, you still have to social distance behind you. So we would still have to separate.
Thank you. But the person behind you would be having the back covered. If you're on 3 sides, that would make all sides for anybody, possibly. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay.
It wouldn't have to be that. You're right, to your point, Jeremy. The child wouldn't have to be, physically boxed in, but then where there are no barriers, there has to be that 6 feet distance between the child, the child seated, the child seated here and the child seated in the communal table behind. As I said, we haven't set those, set up models, to see how that actually would look. We have time, that could be done next week so that we could really see, what we're, what exactly would that look like, and whether that would be, acceptable to us in terms of, being able to function in that classroom.
I think one thing to keep in mind that is this question of the engineering of that room. Could it possibly occur to measure that out appropriately? But you need to put the human factor in and realize that you're working with 5 and 6-year-olds. And as a former kindergarten and first grade teacher, I can say that if you have desks that are closer than 6 feet apart, even with, you're going to spend the entire time telling the kids to pick up their plexiglass shield. They're not going to be contained. They're not going to sit as it is. And I think the idea of social distancing, from my own personal perspective, is a safer route. I'm not saying that as any definition. And certainly if there are board members that want to consider this or suggest this as a way to go, we should talk through that with the building leaders. But I just have to keep in mind the human factor of what that would look like and what it would take a teacher to manage a room like that.
Just to kind of hop on that thought, I think that part of this is also modeling behavior for the kids. I know for myself, and some people say I'm too crazy about it, but I think 6 feet is the minimum. I mean, I like to be 10 feet away from people. And if we're having kids go to school 4 feet apart, how do you model that for now? They're leaving school and they're, inching closer and closer to other people. I think that the guidance that is out there, as we've seen, I don't think that New York is doing this necessarily, but, the CDC changes their guidance based on tweets. I don't know that the guidance is what we should be. I think we should be really conservative. I don't think we should be banking on the guidance because politics are creeping into this in terms of the guidance, and I don't think that Westchester and New York are as bad as what we're seeing nationwide. But I think when I hear anything less than 6 feet, it really concerns me.
Can anyone hear me? Hello?
This is not a moment for public comment. Thank you. The remaining questions that were presented by the board to discuss tonight regarding reopening have generally been folded in to the opening remarks and comments by Valerie, Melissa, and Maureen. With the exception generally about how we move forward from today's meeting and in this collaborative process of making a decision as a community, what the best model is. So I don't know if there wasn't something that was specifically answered, if a board member wants to point that out now. I just am being mindful of our time and the fact that we do have other items on our agenda to go through. Not that this is definitely critical that we have a thorough conversation now. So if there are any aspects of the questions we came today with that weren't addressed, if a board member wants to talk about them.
I had just a couple thoughts I wanted to share. I think one of the ways that we're talking about this, because I think it's just a very human desire to nail things down, is in this destination format. And everyone's got a thought about a destination. And I think it's really important that we look at this as this highly iterative process. Highly iterative is not a term that school districts and public education has really had to embody and deal with. And you know, in many ways, it's, you know, design thinking, project-based learning. I mean, the kind of opportunity we have in front of us right now is the exact thing we're trying to teach our children to do. It's the exact thing that we all recognize is the most important skill set in the future. And I think we have an opportunity to actually embody that in our planning and to really look at this and start to communicate it, even in the way we communicate it, as not in this destination place that we're trying to find, but as in this iterative, and to start actually talking not just about plans, but talking about how are we going to iterate, like dynamically, ongoingly. Because if you ask me right now, Doug, you have to decide exactly what's going to happen. And I had to make a choice right now. I tell you exactly what I would do. I would say, we're going to open with a hybrid model. We're going to do that for probably a month, because God knows so many people haven't been around that many people in so long that if you throw a classroom full of people together, it's just going to be mayhem, whether or not that's the right thing to do. It's not going to feel right to people who've all been isolated for 4 months. So let's just do that. Let's get people back in a room, and then let's start to iterate and test. You know, Melissa has been working on all sorts of great remote learning models. You know, no offense to Melissa, some of them are going to stink and fail. We all know that, right? They just are. And there's going to be all sorts of wacky stuff with kids carrying, you know, plexiglass. You know, I mean, some wacky crap's going to happen when kids are carrying plexiglass around. I mean, this whole thing, let's be honest, is just going to be a friggin' disaster. It is. Like, we just have to be honest about this fact. And if we can start there, and we can say, all right, like, you know, none of us can watch the news and make sense of anything, because science has gotten mixed up with politics, as Lauren was just pointing out. And Lord knows what truth is anymore. So, but I think if you've been paying attention to the news, it's pretty clear this thing's with us for 12 more months. Like, that's pretty clear. It's going to look better. The faucet's going to drip on, it's going to drip off. And I think we're at a place where, like, we have to learn how to move forward with this, right? You know, we have to learn what to do. And I think we can model for the kids how to test and learn. We're at a moment where we can actually use this opportunity to start thinking about what education can be, right? And I think everyone's under a tremendous amount of pressure to find the answer. And I think the answer is not the answer. I think the process is the answer. That's the answer right now. And I mean, I have just, if I was a betting man and I threw it out there, I would say, we're opening with a hybrid. That's what's going to happen. There's going to be some group of kids who are not going to show up on the first day. They're going to be all remote. They're doing that. We're going to find out in 2 or 3 weeks, you know, who's going to maybe come back, who's not going to maybe come back. We don't really know. Maybe we can send a survey out. There's problems with the survey right now, because if you think, yeah, I want to do the home thing, but then, like, you find out that just doesn't work for me. You're like, I'm going to roll the dice. I'm sending my kids to school, right? So you're right, Valerie. It's just, we just don't know what those are going to be. But let's use that first month as a test. I think there's also this idea of, like, uncertainty, right? I mean, it's like, if you go to stand in a line, everyone knows that if you're told it's 45 minutes and you stand for 45 minutes, you're cool with that. If you're told it's 5 minutes, you stand for 45 minutes, you go ballistic, you go crazy. So if we just said to people, you know, it's going to be hybrid. Your kids are going to be at home for 3 days. I know you've been seeing a lot of them. They're driving you up a wall, and you don't want to see them for 3 full days and have them on a, but you know what? It's probably only going to be for a month, right? That's all we're going to really, we're shooting like hell for October 8th to get everyone in the school. Come hell or high water, don't know how we're going to do it. And we're going to maybe get there and the whole thing's going to be a mess, but we really want to do that. But we're going to start out hybrid. I think that gives people a sense of there's a game plan. There's a sense we're moving in this direction. We want to try to do it. And by God, we didn't make it, but we're trying to do that. I don't want to give anyone a sense of false hope, but at the same time, you know, I think that there's a way to, you know, to Jeremy Gallen's point, other people have brought it up. to get everyone in a classroom at some point. We just don't know what it is. And I don't think we're going to know it by August 21st. Now, Jeremy's going to go in the classroom. Other people are going to, John and Lou and Jennifer, you're going to start measuring classrooms. You're going to start figuring out if I can put a tent in the courtyard. It's all sorts of stuff. But, if the last few weeks of August are any indication, the ability to pull that off is going to be very small. So I say this to end on this idea of let's get to a place where we can just say, let's get the horse out of the gates. Let's say this is what it is. And let's have a kind of fast iterative way of thinking to see if we can, get better. And let's figure out, how do we bring the teachers into that? How do we bring the students into that? How do we bring the parents into that? How do we bring them as stakeholders in any classic, highly iterative innovation project to be part of it, right? So that's just kind of where my thinking has been. And I wanted to make sure I shared that and didn't let that just kind of sit inside.
Thank you, Doug. I started the conversation by saying that the reentry is not the destination. So I think I agree with that idea, that it's really a plan to get us through. And one thing I think about, because my training is in child development, is that this whole phase reminds me of that 6-month to 18-month-old phase when you're a parent, and every few weeks you have to adapt to whatever the child you're working with, your child is able to do, and you have to safety protocol your house depending on what they're now able to do, and this constant shifting and adapting to keep providing the safest and the most stimulating environment, even though their abilities and needs keep changing. And it's exhausting. Those phases of development are exhausting. And I think that is what this, for me, I've been sensing that metaphor in this, and that, we're not aiming to get our kid to walk when they're 12 months, we're aiming to keep them growing. So this is just a pathway to keep us moving and keeping our kids growing. I think that's how I'm facing this. So I look forward to the community forum that's happening tomorrow. I hope that some folks that are listening tonight come with some more questions and want to get involved to help us work together on making this work for as many kids as possible on the first day of school.
I don't know if my audio's been so solid, but I would actually, I'd like to add to a couple of those thoughts. I think that's very helpful, Doug. We're definitely looking at a September plan, and the community does need to know that the efforts of our administrators have been above and beyond in July, and they are obviously going to continue in September. And it would absolutely be October 8th is a great point to have out there. We're going to have experiences to our south. Bronxville has found a way to open up K-8 5 days a week, but most of the river towns are certainly, as our first question said, are we heading towards hybrid based on that Friday email that seemed to make it? To Sophia's point, we definitely are prioritizing in-person schooling. That was the directive from the state. And we do want to prioritize that because a lot of medical child health professionals and academics do realize how amazingly difficult learning was in the spring. But I think a lot of the community is reacting to this choice right now that if we don't go full 5 days a week, we drop all the way to 2 days a week. And it seems to be a difficult place right now, as we sense that we might be deciding between 100% screen learning and 60% screen learning. And that's why I know that we have 10 days and we have a lot of energy to consider all three options. Valerie made that clear. But to Jeremy Arnon, it's definitely not where we want to be. Nobody is hugging anybody out here during summer. But, you know, the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending 3 feet. Massachusetts is using 3 feet. A lot of countries in Europe are using 1 meter. And as a classroom teacher, I can tell you my students have never been 6 feet apart. They would have a lot of space between them. But first, let's absolutely look at 6 feet. That is a huge number in New York State, although it does say 6 feet or masks. So as we go to create a safe environment, I think it hurts to know that the choice was from 100% in-class learning instantly down to 40% in-class learning. But if that's what feasibility for our buildings is with our administrators, it's definitely a 1 month thought, and we are not picking a destination right now. We're looking around. Thank you guys, everybody, the administrators, for presenting. This has been a 2.5-hour meeting, but I did want to say the word that's been missing is teachers. 2.5 hours in, we started off by thanking the students for that award. Lou and Valerie, absolutely correct. It's about the students. We haven't said the word teachers yet. And a lot of the priorities have to be, do we have teacher support for live streaming? And have we considered it? Or is that another reason why we should be really prioritizing full capacity if that's going to be a roadblock? It's an instructional method that we have to look at rather quickly now.
Are there any additional board comments about the reopening discussion, or can we move to the business items?
Let's move on.
Okay.
I
I know. We do have a great number of business items under 4A. There's items 1 through 27. Are there any questions or comments among the board about those items?
The only questions I had were about the HVAC stuff. I think you pretty well covered that already. So thank you, Maureen.
Yeah, so also within Melissa's presentation, the number of different learning platforms and the licenses for those are included. I'd like to, would anyone like to put ahead a motion to approve business items 1 through 27?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? There's a second item under business, the resolution to authorize piggybacking on the transportation contract with Ardsley. Were there any questions or comments about that business item? Is there a motion to approve the resolution to authorize the piggybacking on the transportation contract with Ardsley?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? We're moving on to the personnel section. Under personnel, there are 5A, there are 5 items. Were there any questions or comments about personnel 5A?
I just had a quick question. So Miss Dickens came back. That's great to see. And was that because of the kindergarten? Okay.
It was, we were, actually there's been a pretty steady stream of families moving into Hastings with young children. So that number, has moved towards 110. And we still have a couple of weeks left before, September 8th. So that's that's pretty terrific. And what I said to to Amy, John, Maureen, and Melissa is that we should keep that we should keep 6 sections of kindergarten, simply because it's no way for us to know what's going to happen over the summer, and it's a really difficult to make a decision not to continue someone in June, only to find that in another month or two, we could have an increase in student enrollment that would lead us to this point. Fortunately, Miss Dickens, loved being at Hillside, and when Amy reached out to her, she was happy to return. So that's sort of as a good ending to that story. So we're
That's
fortunate
great.
in that regard.
Thank you for that. And then on the same note, we're definitely not trying to leave anyone out, but if I do leave anyone out, it's a mistake. But I do see also that Linda Tam is also coming back, and I see her as one of our 74 participants, 2.5 hours in, and she was a 3rd grade teacher last year. And of course, that is nice to read that you are coming back. But if there's any other teachers out there that we didn't notice, it's not on purpose that we've only pointed out 2 fabulous returning spots. Thank you, Ms. Tam.
I'd also like to recognize Jesse Merchant, who is leaving us to go to his dream job in Section 1 as an assistant director. That's a loss for us because I think Jesse's a really amazing administrator. Cares very deeply about the work that he does on behalf of our students in physical education, health, and athletics. Jesse has also been instrumental in helping us in the recruitment process as we move this week to establish our interview committees and select the next assistant director for physical education, health, and athletics. So I wish you well, Jesse, and you've made a major contribution to the school district, and we thank you for your dedication and your hard work on behalf of children. Thank you very much, Valerie.
Thank you, Valerie. So yes, there's the items of personnel A, and then the resignations mentioned on B, and there's also the leaves of the absence mentioned in section C. Is there a motion for approving the items 5A, B, and C under personnel?
So moved. Yeah.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? We then have minutes. There are minutes to the regular meeting on July 7th, 2020, and also the organizational meeting on July 7th, 2020. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes from those 2 meetings? Is there a motion to approve the minutes for both the July 7th regular meeting and the July 7th organizational meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? It appears there's a committee report from the Diversity Committee.
Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to do a quick report out for the meeting that we had on July 30th. thankfully, the diversity coordinator, Ms. Mateo Toledo, provided some very comprehensive minutes for the meeting that took place there. You'll see that she provides an overview basically of everybody's reporting out from the central office to each of the respective schools and different departments. But it was really just kind of, something to maintain the momentum over the summer as we launch into this new year of work. And it was a really good overview of the different and exciting things that have been happening within the district, but also community-wide. So I'm just going to briefly, I'm not going to go through it all because it's there in very good detail, but just the highlight from each of the aspects. From the central office perspective, curriculum and instruction, Melissa gave a good sense of like the work that the educators have been doing. And one of the things that she talked about that I think is something I'd like to highlight is talking about doing a culturally responsive curriculum audit. Always kind of reviewing where the curriculum stands and kind of using guiding questions as is noted here. In addition to that, one of the things that we're interested in administering is a new school climate survey, but this one would be more with specific questions given to questions on race. So that's just, a brief summation of what's happening at the curriculum and instruction level. We also discussed how Lynn Walker, who is, the person who currently is leading work in our human resources department, is really focusing her intention on recruiting the best and most diverse group of people to be working in the district. And in the past, that's encompassed doing things of, having different types of job fairs. And so in the current incarnation that we're going to be moving into, Lynn is going to be leading up the Human Resources Office in its new capacity. When we launched into what's happening at the high school, Mr. Pietro talked about the different town halls that they've already had in July and the one that will be held in August. They talked about the BIPOC affinity group, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. That's going to be continuing with Ms. Mateo Toledo and by Mr. Tesfa Stewart, who's our Assistant Director of Special Education. There's also going to be a white affinity group that's going to be led up by Mr. Abrams in their English department. And they discussed the two different community reads that are going to be addressed. One for the 11th and 12th graders, Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America. And then the younger version of that, also by Mr. Kendi and Mr. Reynolds, Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism and You. Then we moved to the Farragut Middle School, and Ms. Borelli talked about how it seems probably that they're going to be focusing on doing an appropriate book read for kids in the 8th grade. And so they're collaborating about what that right topic would be, what the right book would be to continue the conversation. And that's going to be happening within the framework of the English department. At Hillside, Ms. Cases reminded us about the fact that the Courageous conversational lessons have been adapted and are going to be brought to the 4th grade. So the first half of the Sparks curriculum have already been created and adapted. And there's some talk of potentially there being an affinity group of the likes that we see at the high school and perhaps having that in the middle school. But for Hillside, if that were to happen, it would be advised by Ms. Melvin. So then we transitioned into speaking about the work of the RISE community group, and they've been really active in terms of the community forums that they've been holding and that have been sponsored by the PTSA's Inclusion Working Group. They've had some sessions that have been held at the library, really well received in terms of the work that was done by the facilitator that they found to navigate those conversations. And in addition to that, RISE was also fundamental in having a read aloud series called Stories That Speak with picture books, which were popular and well attended. And I think that they just had their last one, according to these notes, on August 4th. Furthering that work was actually a new group that is being headed up by a parent. Her name is Ms. Cristina Catalan, and that's called Peacock for Parents of Children of Community Committees. And that's just getting launched. So, they're going to keep us abreast of the progress as they continue to grow and establish their presence within town. Another exciting innovation that's being brought to one of the parents in the community, Marie Louise Miller, is the hohdiversity.com website, and it's really meant as kind of a gathering or information place / clearinghouse where people can form community. So since it's not up and running yet, we have her contact information listed here on these notes so that anybody who's interested in the work that she's been up to, and she's a very active person, should reach out and contact her with ideas or anything that you'd be interested in posting. The Race Matters Committee, which is comprised of teachers and staff within the district, just talked about how they had really their first really major PowerPoint presentation and slideshow that still is featured on our website's home district. That was actually launched in the spring of 2017. And they're saying that, you know, looking back on it, it really gives them a framework for what they had hoped at that time seemed very aspirational. And it was very gratifying to them to be able to see how much has actually been achieved when it just seemed such a long shot at that time. So looking at it, and they're saying that they're revisiting for this year kind of, you know, what they can adapt, what needs to be changed. And then we had, you know, obviously the students talk about what they would like to accomplish in the year to come. They're talking about their own vision and mission statements that they'd like to do, that they, you know, have planned and are putting a good deal of thought into. They're really a great group of students, and they're hoping maybe that they might even be able to take on a mural for the district. So in the closing out portion, we were just discussing the different forums that have already been sponsored. And these, as you'll note, we'll have the first one, or we have one that's still outstanding for the high school, and that's going to be Time to Talk About Racism. They're hosted by Dr. Henning Piedmont, as well as Mr. Stewart and Ms. Mateo Toledo. And it's just, again, conversations about systemic racism and kind of like how that's felt or manifested society-wise. And it's a place for students to have a safe place to be able to talk about, you know, conversations that can be difficult to tackle. And then we also had the high school town hall meetings, and same thing. They reviewed when they're going to be talking about their next community read. As I said, like all of the different principals for the respective building did talk about basically the efforts that they have underway in their school, which are quite impressive. And then the conclusion to the meeting was just talking about what they hope to achieve in the upcoming school year. So, you know, there is some thought that perhaps when the school year kicks off, that they will be able to, the work of the diversity committee will be able to be highlighted as we start off the new year, really tackling what is going to be envisioned in this adult racial literacy toolkit, excuse me. Their vision and mission statement is hoping to be fleshed out, and then just more representation and engagement with the community at large. So it was a robust meeting. And Valerie was there and Tesfa was there. So if anybody else would like to enhance any of my reporting out, you're more than welcome to do so.
I want to thank you for that. It was very thorough, Sylvia. And I want to thank Janice Mateo Toledo for all of her wonderful work in coordinating and making sure that the mission of the Diversity Committee continues. And that, you know, as a collective group, we want to make sure that the work is known throughout the school district and that it grows. And so that's our effort on our August 31st welcome back to faculty and staff. We'll be highlighting that work from within the Diversity Committee, as well as other groups that have been working in the community who have the same mission to create an anti-racist culture and to make sure that we help our young people to make sense of the world and to acknowledge the areas in which we can make it better.
And I just will tack on one thing that I forgot that I had noted in my notes, is that Martha Polstein, who's one of the teachers at the middle school, really made a point of pointing out how really the foundation of the group and the focus of the group is to focus on what it's going to take to have our kids come back into a safe social and emotional social emotional learning space as they return to school after having been gone for a long time, and how that's really like the crux of the mission of this group for all students, obviously. And so I just thought that it was really affirming thing to hear for all of us adults who kind of always clamor to, like, you know, are we being industrious enough in these meetings? And really, like, what it all comes down to, and certainly in the context of the broader conversation we've had today, all of this is being done, you know, front and center has to be the well-being of the people in our buildings, students, teachers, staff, our admin. Like, we are really, you know, both logistically, physically, and emotionally in it together. So it's a good, it's really a privilege to be a part of that community.
Sylvia, I just want to thank you. I thought that was a great committee report, and just wanted to say that I've actually been reading Stamped, and there's so much out to be read right now, but I'll confess, but I'm not ashamed. Started the other version, and then actually my son, who teaches middle school, suggested that I read the young adult version, and it's much more graspable. So thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. And I think it's really impressive, the different number of ways our community members can get involved on these very meaningful conversations and these very meaningful aspects of coming together. So even despite this social distancing and the sense that we're apart from one another, that that the diversity committee it has ties to all these different aspects of way that our community is coming together, and that's a really positive thing to continue to see. We have a number of items under new business. The first of which is the outside usage of school facilities. I didn't know if Maureen, if you wanted to speak to that. I know that that's something that some board members had questions about in regard to the safety of our buildings in the fall.
Yes. So as we talk about reopening, obviously many programs run in our buildings, both inside and outside. And you know, we were starting to get people reaching out and wondering if they'll be able to run programs if we're open. So I wanted just to kind of speak to the board, and I try to group the programs differently based upon, like, I think after school, I think we could agree if they're for the most part for childcare for working families, and thinking about if we were to allow them space if we're going to be in school and there may be a need, to try to understand, like, if there is a need for that, would we be willing to allow them to operate again with the same protocols that we have in place, and they would have to adhere to that and have a safety plan and kind of submit to us some type of plan and how they would, if we were to allow them, ensure that they're also practicing similar models to what we're doing during the day, depending on what model we're in, right? So whether it be hybrid or full in, we would expect them to also have a plan in place similar to the way we were required to do so to ensure that protocols are met within our building. We would also, you know, need to either assess what the additional cleaning of those spaces would look like and what that may require if we were going to allow them. I think the group in the middle, the recreation groups, I think the idea there would be we would hold right now. I don't really believe that any of them have submitted, like the Girl Scouts we haven't heard from. I did speak to River Arts, and they're not planning on going in person instruction till more than likely like January, February. So, you know, they said at that point in time, you know, they'll reach out to me in December and see where we're at, just not only in Hastings, but meaning in the state, in the country, you know, seeing where we're kind of at, to kind of reassess, and then depending on, you know, where we are. But I think they're thinking, at least for this year, they may not be using our building. So, you know, many of the groups in the middle, I think, would be groups that we would hold out of not using the space, even if we were in full capacity for the time being. And then there's those outdoor groups. I mean, I think there's indoor sports, and there's also outdoors. I can tell you that ASO has already submitted an application, and ASO covers like Rivertowns United and I guess ASO is a few different teams operate out of Hastings, and they have already requested usage to start now. Their programs, they're allowed to be up and running. They're looking for space. They use, as many people on the board know, they do, you know, run quite a few teams. I don't know their exact number this year, but it's a few hundred kids typically in Hastings that participate in it. Similar, I mean, I guess in looking at each program, I think, try to understand what the board would like to do. I think the legal counsel will advise, especially with some of these outdoor groups, probably to limit use of the spaces outdoors. But I think, trying to get a sense, I've been speaking to my counterparts in the river towns because a lot of these teams, operate in the river towns, and trying to get a sense of if they're going to be allowing outdoor usage starting the fall. So I didn't know whether the board felt, what we were thinking overall. I mean, I think that getting a sense of if the after school programs need to run, if parents are in need of that childcare, or do we want to consider allowing them use of the building? The middle group, we don't have to worry about. And then just kind of thinking about the recreational sports, and really focusing on the fall, because they're the ones right now that would, both the Little League and ASO for the fall are requesting space, and all the other groups are indoor recreational programs. So I think we would have to assess that at a later time anyway. That would not be something we would be issuing permits for right now.
Maureen, were you able to gather from your counterparts in the river towns any decisions that they've made regarding ASO? Or,
I have a meeting this week with them, and I think I wanted just to bring it to the board's attention, being we're already getting requests for it. I think, as I mentioned, the legal counsel, of course, being very, I think they're saying, although you can technically allow them, they're kind of advising where we can to not allow use of space. But I can get that information, Lauren, and I can share that with the board once I know definitively. And maybe I'll even send a survey out, a little bit in the larger group. And again, the after school programs similar to ours, like in RZ, where there are childcare programs, and in Dobbs Ferry, they're looking at those in one grouping. The sports programs, they're trying to make a decision on. But I guess what I would say is, I think if in the river towns, or even within the town village of Hastings, we've tried to coordinate and be sort of in sync with them, for lack of a better word. So even with the town, I also will reach out to the town manager to report out that, because when they've allowed the Little League, we've closed our tennis courts or opened our tennis courts kind of in coordination with them, because of course if they're going to be opening Zinzer or Uniontown, the idea of allowing less capacity on the fields, that's where we've also tried to coordinate. But I think it's kind of looking at both what we're doing in our town and as well as what's going on in other districts. But I wanted to put it on your radar, because I think, at one point or another, we don't have, obviously it's late tonight, you'll have to make a decision, but I think we need to start thinking about it, because we will, once we gather that information, see what direction we want to move forward, what direction we want to go in. And I've let them know that. I said, we're just trying to open up schools. So we're looking at each application and really, it's different in the summer now that we're opening schools. We don't want to possibly have people on our grounds while we're also running the school district. So that's like a little bit different than it was in the summer, where the Little League was using our baseball field a bit. So that's just didn't know if anyone had any thoughts on it. But I think if we should at least have conversations with our after school programs and understand if they're thinking about a plan, because I think we should get a plan from them. Like, I don't think we should just allow them to, come in with some type of written document. They can kind of look at ours and try to, implement some of those social distancing and mask wearing and things like that. Because if we are in a hybrid model, and there may be a real need for some parents to use that. So, I just didn't want to deny them if it was needed for the community.
Yeah, there is guidance available too. If you're speaking to them about presenting something to the district, there is guidance available from the Department of Health regarding childcare programs that's separate from educational settings. So perhaps not that they're licensed through the Department of Health that way, but as a sort of guidepost of expectations.
I'll have that conversation this week with them. Sorry, Jeremy?
Maureen, yep. Thank you for definitely breaking that out. We definitely have Aspire and Add Water, and serving over 100 families, and they have been in contact with the board. And it is nice to hear that, you are separating that out for our consideration. I mean, we also, as a board, should realize that, you know, both those organizations do have a, you know, a 20-year, you know, history of working within education as prior teachers. And they do tend to use our outdoor facilities as much as possible in September. So I don't think they're really going to be able to present a clear plan because we haven't been able to talk to them how to staff up. 40% in school really affects the, you know, the Aspire business, and I'm sure Edgewater as well. But they have been, Lauren, as you said, they are on large Zoom calls with a lot of, they have their own organizations of after school, and they are desperate. They know they're not our first priority. Students and teachers first, and then our families aftercare needs second, but they are desperate to hear from, you know, our district for what we can allow for them.
Some, you know, her program's a little bit probably easier to monitor. I think Aspire, like you said, they use more an outdoor space, so their plans may look different, but I'll loop back to both of them and see whether they've started to kind of put something together that I can share with the board, knowing that I think childcare probably would be the priority based upon the need. And then the second would be those outside sports that are looking to, because you know, to a lot of people that's going to be important also, but I just want to make sure, you know, we're doing kind of lock in step what other districts are doing and our own village. And I have to say the Little League has been pretty good. I mean, we checked on them a number of times, just, you know, and they were enforcing the fans and the mask. I mean, at least when we were, when we saw them, so.
Thank you, Maureen.
Welcome.
The next on the list is the revised school year calendar, which is mentioned in the reopening plan that was submitted by the district to have in open schooling on September 8th. It moves to Superintendent's Day to the front of the calendar where they had been previously in other positions in the calendar. And that will allow for more teacher days at the beginning of the year. Is that correct, Valerie?
That is correct. So by moving those days, by adding on to the August 31st, which is our first superintendent's conference day, that was a part of the original calendar that the board approved in the spring, and September 1st, we also moved our the two other conference days, the one being June 25th, which is still a ratings date. That's a New York State required you know, labeling for that date. So we took that superintendent's conference day, and we also took the November 4th, the November 3rd, which is our election day, which was also going to be a full day of parent-teacher conferences. So we simply chose another date, and the we being the presidents and the vice presidents of the 4 bargaining units, Maureen, Melissa, and myself, and talked about where they felt that, you know, particularly around the parent-teacher conference day, it would make the most sense to have that. So that will give us the time to offer professional learning around some of the remote learning approaches that the committee that Melissa's working with, which includes not only administrators, but teachers. We have our required safety training that will be conducted by Alteris on one of those or part of those days. We have our medical professionals, our nurses, conducting our required COVID-19 training. Melissa's organized some specific training that our teachers have asked for on September 1st relative to the G Suite, along with some of the signature practices that were identified by a committee of teachers that support some consistent practices in the use of Google Classroom and the Google Calendar, as well as some other digital tools that are supplementary that Melissa mentioned. Some more professional learning opportunities on the 2nd, and then some time, obviously, throughout for the buildings to work together. So the administrators working with the faculty and staff of each school, as well as the faculty and staff having time to work and collaborate together before we open on September 8th.
Thank you, Valerie. Is there a motion to approve the revised 2020-21 school calendar?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? The next item, C, is a resolution that's recommended regarding the current public health crisis and the fact that public school districts are operating under compliance by both by executive orders of the governor, by the state education department, and also the New York State Department of Health that are potentially overriding any existing policies that we may have in our district policies. So I believe I need to read the resolution. Is that correct, Janine? I'll read it, and then if there are any questions, and then we can vote on it. It is, whereas due to the threat to public health caused by COVID-19 pandemic, the district is required to comply with executive orders promulgated by the governor and directives issued by the New York State Department of Health and the New York State Education Department, which may be inconsistent with district policies and administrative regulations. And whereas during this period of time, to the extent that any district policy or administrative regulation is inconsistent with executive orders or directives of the DOH or SED, the district will be operating in accordance with those orders and directives, as well as the district school reopening plan for 2020-21, adopted pursuant to such executive orders and directives. Be it resolved that where any provisions of district policies and or administrative regulations conflict with the executive orders, DOH or SED directives, or the reopening plan, they are temporarily suspended to the extent necessary to comply with such executive orders, DOH or SED directives, and or the reopening plan. Does anyone have any questions regarding this resolution? Is there a motion to approve resolution regarding board policies during the pandemic?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? So item D and related E and F are all revised policies that we've had on record in our district policies, but are compliant with changes that were made on the federal level to Title IX, and our new policies that have been revised with the input of council reflect those changes. I don't know if any board members have any questions about these three items of policy D, E, and F. And Valerie, if you could remind me of the timeline for approval. Do we have the time for a second read of these policies that we can move to approve them at the next meeting, or if they need to be approved now?
The policy needs to be approved this week, so by August 14th, we should have the revised policies approved at this board meeting. So, and I also was notified by council that there's a potential that there could be another tweak later on. So, you know, we may see this come up again in the, you know, in the school year, that we have to make yet another adjustment. So, but as it stands, we'd be in compliance with the.
What?
We'd be in,
Going to
we'd be in
everyone
compliance
again?
with the regulation.
So knowing that the changes were to comply with the federal law that changed and no other changes, is there a motion to approve the policies D, E, and F that are on item number 8?
It's basically a decoupling of the sexual harassment policy for the adults and for the students, and that the complaint form would be a complaint form used for DASA. That could also be used for a sexual harassment complaint.
A motion so moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, we have our second public comment. Janine, has anyone contacted you during the duration of the meeting to speak at this comment period?
Yes, I've had one person who wants to comment, and then I've been posed quite a few questions online. So I don't know if we want to just do that as a document on the website, or if you want me to read every question that was sent in.
That's unclear. So the folks who, we will get to the one that requested to speak. Are the other ones requesting that you state those? Did they ask you to state those questions at our meeting? Because that would be the assumption. So
right.
I would say yes.
They emailed me questions, but they did not say, you know, they simply, well, yeah, they said as part of public comments. So I guess I should read the questions that people sent in.
All right.
So Catherine DiMartino is the first one who said she wanted to speak in person.
Great. Catherine, if you could please go ahead and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Catherine DiMartino. I'm a resident of Hastings, and I have 3 children in the district. I'm also a professor of education, and I work with aspiring leaders from around the tri-state area. So I understand how difficult this time is, and I applaud all of your excellent and hard work, and I'm grateful for it. There are 2 issues that came up tonight that have really been troubling me, and I urge you to think about a bit more. One is the question of the community survey. Governor Cuomo was very clear in his discussion last week and in his mandates about community input. It's why we're having our forums. And I encourage you to survey the community again. You may not, data is always helpful. It may not necessarily guide direct decision makings, but it will inform us. I would like to know, what do parents want to do? Do they want hybrid? Do they want all in? Do they want online? As a community, we need to know that. And as a school district and a board, you're incumbent to the community and the community's desires. So we need to hear from the community. Also, I'd like to hear from teachers. We have not heard enough from them tonight. They're the essential individuals in our schools. I want to know if the teachers want to be there, if they're comfortable. What's the school climate going to be like? And that all depends on our teachers. So I'd like to see a survey of teachers. And I'd love to hear, do they want to be there? Are they comfortable online? I just need to know this. And that level of transparency would really help me, and I'm sure many other community members, in our own decision making. The other piece that I wanted to revisit was the discussion around remote learning. At one point, I heard someone suggest that that wasn't schooling at all, and that made me really uncomfortable because there are families that need to use remote learning because of their children's illnesses, their fragile health, or because of other personal situations. The governor said that this is currently an option, and I ask you to give us as community members more detail and information about what this will look like in a really concrete way. Thank you for your time. I appreciate all that you're doing, and I look forward to hearing you.
Thank you. Janine, if you could go ahead and read the, I think you said 3 additional questions that came by email.
A few more. Okay, the first one is from Sandra Dawn, and she says, within the hybrid model, will children be learning new materials on live stream? And when they are on their at-home days? Or will the curriculum be dialed back so that kids are only learning new material when they are in person at school? Melissa Ehrenrich, why haven't parents heard any details about what a full or remote learning plan would look like, and why isn't that plan being considered more seriously at this point? Why is the focus on the hybrid model? Rachel McQueen, when will the decision be made to go back to school or not? I would have thought after Board of Education got clarity tonight, they would decide. Also, who makes the final call, the superintendent or the Board of Education? Doesn't the school have to start planning for back to school either way, whatever the decision is? Let me just double check that no others came in. Okay, that's it from what I can tell.
Thank you, Janine.
And Lauren, I know we never really comment after anybody speaks, but you did say thank you, and waiting 3 hours, Mr. Martino, Christina, I think is quite impressive. Thank you for sharing your comments with us.
And I did mention at the beginning of the meeting, if those that are listening now or those that sent in those email questions, we will be going forward addressing questions that came forward to the board in public comment on our website prior to the next board meeting. Are there any Board of Education comments?
I just want to make a quick statement. Just wanted to say, during a recent exchange of emails internally to the board about board business, I wrote a response that inadvertently included a resident, and there was a statement regarding a member of the community that I should not have made. And I just wanted to apologize for doing so. Just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Jeremy. Are there any other board comments?
I will just piggyback on one of the comments I made earlier with this idea of iterative processes that I think we're going to have to get really engaged with, and I think it's going to not be just this week, next week. It's going to be the whole year. I think it's really a whole new discipline. So it's kind of taking what Catherine DiMartino said and really kind of embodying that ongoingly throughout the year. I think we have a real opportunity, and I've done a lot of it, and to the degree that I can be helpful, I'm happy to be so I'll throw that out there, because I think that there's just great opportunities beyond the COVID thing for us to continue to get better at that as a community. I know that I can look back over the past decade, and I'm sure we're not the only school district. It's a tough thing, but it'd be a great thing in my mind for us to continue to practice to just get better at. I'd love to be a part of that if it could be helpful.
I just want to share that I have been really impressed this evening with the amount of information that we've shared with one another, and the amount of uncertainty we've allowed ourselves to feel together without frustration. And I want to thank all of the meetings that the board doesn't see that got us to this point. There are a lot of meetings with teachers, a lot of one-on-one meetings with parents, a lot of meetings with our buildings and grounds folks, a lot of meetings with local business, local government officials, and other districts that I know our building leaders and our administration is constantly been doing over the summer. So I want to thank everyone that's been attending to live with that uncertainty, and I think it comes from that foundation of the constant information seeking that our professionals in the district are seeking from one another, their willingness to listen to us, to each other. So I do look forward to reaching day one of school on September 8th in a better place. And I think I have faith as a community that we can get there. Is there a motion to close the Board of Ed meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Good night, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Good night. Thanks.
Night, Lauren.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.